be treated in a courteous and respectful manner. We'll start this morning with comments from LSO Director Matt Obrecht and Bill Stats in the interim, and probably some introductory comments as well. Welcome, Director Obrecht.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of Management Council. We do this every year, walk through from the preceding interim and session, the two pieces of information that Heather Kammerman provided to you last week. The one titled Interim Committee Bill Statistics, and the other one LSO Drafts and Interim Committee Staffing Statistics. The first one on the Interim Committee for the 2024 session, which would be the 2023 interim. We had 131 committee bills numbered. 90 of those bills were introduced, 80 were enacted during the 2024 budget session. And you can see how those numbers, 69% of the bills that were numbered, committee bills that were numbered, were introduced, 61% were enacted, 89% of the introduced bills, committee bills, were enacted. And you can see how that plays out. The best way to read this is to skip every other year and look at the even numbered years for the other budget sessions. As an example, in 2022 had roughly the same number of committee bills numbered, 129. Of those 129, 124 were introduced, 76 were enacted. So actually had a slightly higher percentage of committee bills enacted this year, though there were much lower bills that were introduced. If nobody has any questions on that interim committee bill, I'll go to the LSO drafts and interim committee staffing stats. All right, so for the 23 interim, 24 budget session, there were 610 total bill drafts requested for LSO. That is an extremely high number for a budget session. As you can see, in 2022, we had 451 bill draft requests. In 2020, 599. In 2018, 519. The other numbers I want to talk about are the numbers of committees staffed. You can see that 27 is a slight uptick over the last couple interims from the select committees and task forces that were created at the 23 session and following that, but we're still down quite a bit from about 5 years ago. And that a lot of those were task forces surrounding the Capitol renovation and also the Department of Health Facilities task forces. Casper State Office building was also during that time as well. Meeting days are also down from what they were just a few years ago. Committee staffing days are up, but that number is really misleading. We're sending more staff to committees than we ever have before. Main thing is that that's trying to build resiliency and a bench within LSO. We just don't retain staff like we used to. And so we need folks to be trained and up to speed faster on committee staffing than we did in the past. And the best way we can think to do that is to get them exposure to committees through staffing as many meetings as they can on the first couple years they're here. So, Mr. Chairman, I guess, the reason I like to do this at the start of this meeting is just ask everybody to bear in mind that interim committees have a real, they take a toll on staff and on members. And while they're certainly important, they can be overdone. And I think that's council's job as kind of the guardian of both members' time and staff time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Obrecht. Very much appreciate it. Just a matter of statement. The vote was to not have a special session, just so it goes out on the public that we're not. In support of Director Obrecht, I will tell you I'll be fairly hard on part of your committees, or most of them, as far as trying to cut some days out of them and shorten them up. We're in a election year, as you all know, and we're at a time that I think it's appropriate to look pretty tight on what we do. With that, I'll turn the floor over real quick for any statements. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do think it's important to have a look as we go into today at today's interim committee bill statistics, where for this year, for the first time in the history of this recording that we have in front of us, only 70% of committee bills, less than 70%, 69% were introduced in the budget session. So we had 41 committee bills that were worked during the interim that were not introduced. And honestly, I think that's a little bit disconcerting that that much effort went into the process and then those bills were not given due consideration. So honestly, as we're contemplating today, working through committee bills, it bears some discussion. Does that mean that too many bills were produced? Well, you look back at history and it's not an atypically high number, but it perhaps is on the high side. Were these bills not of sufficient quality, or what exactly is going on that led to those bills not being considered in the legislative session? I think it's up to us, it's some of our responsibility to make sure that the bills that are being worked in the interim are sufficiently worked to be ready for the legislative session. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but that's something that should perhaps be concerning to us.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just, my comments are a little similar, and I said this, I think, at last year's interim discussion, is I think committees take on too many topics, and as a result, we get a mile wide and an inch deep, and I'm not sure we always bring out the best products we could because we try to do everything. So I don't know how we pare that back. I think as committee chairman, you have to figure that out to a degree because you ultimately decide what bills come up and what bills don't. So I just think that's something we all need to think about.
Thank you. With that, we're going to roll right into it. I'm going to ask all of the presenters, keep it as tight as you can. Some of us would like to actually be able to get out of here before midnight. So everybody's got the materials. We don't have to spend a huge amount of time drilling down on them. Get to the point, tell us what you want, and let us get down the road. With that, Chairman Washut and Chairman Landon, you have the floor on judiciary.
Mr. President, Chairman, thank you. Good morning to the Management Council. It is good to be back, although I walked by the Senate chamber and when I looked in, I got this twitch in my left cheek. But I've been able to get that under control. It's good to see everyone. Glad to present some things that we brought forward after our interim committee meeting at the end of the session. And we've got that in front of you. Criminal law issues, law enforcement issues again, adoption and foster care, corrections and parole issues, statutory amounts for the Wyoming Governmental Claims Act, and then a couple of other minor considerations for you this morning. Just to get started, the criminal law issues, we were asked by the Judiciary Branch to take a look at protection orders and stipulations. This would include in 2021, you might remember Senate File 75, which we did some work on the Senate side when Senator Nethercott was the chairman. We actually passed that bill out of the Senate with a unanimous vote, and it just ran into some whitecaps on the water on the other side. But it still has some relevance, and that would be a piece of this whole stipulation and protective order set of issues. So, Mr. Chairman, maybe you'd like to take the next topic unless there's, we'll just finish up real quickly, Mr. President, if that's okay, and then we'll get to any questions.
Mr. President, Speaker, our next topic is dealing with some law enforcement issue. Once the committee would like to take a hard look at some of these topics that are floating around out there. Last year at the interim, we visited the Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy as a committee during our meeting in Douglas. Took a tour. For many of our members, it was the first time they'd ever been there. And it raised a lot of questions about the duration of our peace officer training in Wyoming. We're on the low end compared to many other states in terms of the number of weeks required for our peace officer training. Is that appropriate? Does it need to be reconsidered? So that's our big issue there on the peace officer training. Take a good look at what we do in Wyoming and how well it's gaining results for our people. Also, we were approached by the Wyoming prosecutors last year at our interim meeting in Douglas at the end of the interim with an idea of having a prosecutor liaison position created within state government. And it was an intriguing idea. It has value in terms of training and development of prosecuting personnel. And we'd like to take a deeper look at that over the interim and our law enforcement issues.
So, Mr. President, our priority 3, we actually had several requests that we take a look at adoption and foster care issues. I think it's important, and the committee felt pretty strongly that a good look at this part of the world out there would be prudent, and we really, the foster care issues, including preventing sibling separation and ways to improve our foster care system, we think that might be beneficial. It's been a while since that's been looked at. And so that would all be lumped into our priority 3, adoption and foster care.
Thank you. Priority 4, correction and parole issues. The Department of Corrections came to us and asked us to take a look at some issues, including the restoration of civil rights topic. And also we, for the first time in my memory, had an issue brought to us by the Board of Parole. The Board of Parole is an important element in the correctional scheme of things, and we had not heard from them previously. But they asked us to take a look at some of the statutes pertinent to the parole operations in the state, and we were eager to take a look at that area.
So as we get to priority 5 and 6, these are not expected to be real time consumers, but statutory monetary amounts, that was brought up, and we thought it important that we take a look. Wyoming Governmental Claims Act and settlement agreements for minors, for example. Some of these statutes get down the road, and it's been quite a long time since they've been looked at. We're going to try to keep that narrowly focused on this one. You could throw the door wide open, and there's lots and lots of statutes that have monetary figures, and but we propose to just keep it on these two targets, and we don't think that'll be a real time consumer. So.
And in our priority 6, we get a number of reports that are required statutorily to come to the committee. We want to have an opportunity for the committee to respond to some of those reports that come out of the Attorney General's office and elsewhere. And also, historically, the committee has looked at Wyoming Supreme Court decisions that reference the legislature, where the court sometimes says, maybe the legislature wants to reconsider this, or maybe wants to help us interpret this language or something, or because the legislature has not addressed this issue within this statute, and it came up in our case, maybe the Joint Judiciary would like to take a look at it. So last year, we did not look at those topics, but we do think it's appropriate maybe every other year to have the opportunity, have our LSO staff bring to us 2 or 3 Wyoming Supreme Court decisions where the court has said maybe some attention is needed from the legislature, and we'll consider those.
Mr. President, that wraps it up. You've got it in front of you. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a look at what we thought we might be able to accomplish in the interim. 3 different meetings. We're keeping them in Casper and Cheyenne in the interest of travel time, et cetera. And that's what we've got in mind. We'd be glad to answer any questions.
Well done, Chairman. Appreciate your service for both of you. Your 3 meeting dates appropriate for time. You got time to get your appropriate done and get it put together, you feel?
Mr. President, one of the things I discovered when I took over on your behalf as your Judiciary Chairman, you don't lack topics for the Judiciary Committee. I'm looking at the former chairman, she's been there. But we feel like we've got this narrowly focused enough, and we feel like we can get the work done. Hopefully, we can stay on point and get after it in these 3 meetings and bring something good back to the body.
Perfect. Questions from the committee? Summary.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is I guess, a comment to the committee, and just because this happens to be the first committee up, but I mean, a comment to council. You know, we have 2 hot button issues, one being gun-free zones and another one being foreign ownership of land in Wyoming. And I know one committee has the last one in their interim topics. But I think one question is, where do we want to put those? Do we want to put them anywhere? Do we want to work them harder during the interim than seeing personal bills come out, and where should they be? And so I'm just posing that question to council as we go forward. Obviously, at the end, I think we can mend back into any committee we want. So I just think as we go forward, we should think about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great point. Senator Nethercott?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
not a
sure.
comment, but a question to the chairman. On priority number 2, law enforcement issues, I know Representative Washut, as a longtime member of the Judiciary Committee and now chair, is familiar with the issues of law enforcement and NIBRS reporting. Do you intend to follow up under this priority number 2 concerning Wyoming law enforcement agencies' cooperation and participation in the NIBRS system?
Thank you, Mr. President, Senator. Not opposed at all. Take a look at that. It's not specifically called out, but it's one of those reports that we would anticipate the Attorney General's office would give us a brief update on where they're at, how many of the agencies across Wyoming are now compliant.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow-up. I think I provided a report to both of you with a current listing of December of 2024 or December of 2023. A significant amount of agencies are still not compliant. And Representative Washut, I know that was an important issue for you. It's actually costing the state significant sums of money by that failure to cooperate, and results in disparate data being compiled for our state. So I would ask that you quickly just take that up. I don't think it'll consume much time in light of the fact you already have this as a priority topic number 2, and maybe a better priority than the prosecutors having a lobbyist.
Mr. President, the lack of reliable data has been something that's been a bit of a bugaboo for Joint Judiciary for a number of years. And so the NIBRS development of the National Incident-Based Reporting System is seen as a major step in the right direction. And so I think the committee would be eager to get that information.
Mr. President, so gentlemen, when you look through your list of topics here, how many potential anticipated bill drafts do you think might come out of your interim work?
Can you, my apologies, Mr. President, can you repeat the last part of that? I just didn't quite hear you, Senator Hicks.
Bill drafts.
So
that come.
with your list of priorities and your schedule and what you're going to look at, do you have an idea of how many anticipated bill drafts might come out of your interim work?
Mr. President and Senator Hicks, we have not specifically talked about that. Last year, going into our 3rd meeting, we were looking at 18 or 19 drafts. I think the committee ended up bringing 12, if I remember correctly. To me, that would be a target zone. I think you get above the 10 or 12 range, and I think that goes to what Director Obrecht was talking about at the beginning of the meeting. So I hope that answers the question. You know, I think we're going to try to be careful with how many drafts we come. You can always turn some of those issues over to committee members or fellow legislators who feel passionate about a given issue. Mr. Chairman, anything to add on that?
Further questions, committee? Further questions? Seeing none, public comment. Do we have anyone from the, thank you, Chairman. Anyone from the public like to comment on any of these topics? Seeing none, public comment is closed. I'll have you guys pick on me if we've got stuff online, Heather. I'm bad about that. I don't have a computer on, or whoever's got that and follow.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the interim topics for judiciary as presented.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Stith.
I'd move we add gun-free zones as a topic for judiciary.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Gun-free zones is a topic discussion. Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, what priority would that be for them?
Representative Stith, do you have a?
Mr. Chairman, we could make that, I'm not sure it matters too much. We could make it priority, between priority 2 and 3, for example. I'm not sure
Okay.
it matters.
Further discussion? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, so what was the first addition that your
Gun-free zones,
that was the only one?
only one,
Okay.
single topic,
All right.
gun-free zones.
Thank you.
That's where we're at. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Gun-free zones is passed as topic number 2.5. Any further amendments? Further amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator, Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, since we're adding a topic to gun-free zones, maybe we should lighten their load a little bit, and I'd move to delete from priority number 2, law enforcement issues, the topic of creating a prosecutor coordinator position.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Co-Chairman.
So priority number what? Are we removing?
Part of 2.
It's just part of 2? Okay. All right.
Further discussion? Further discussion, seeing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. One no, noted. We've removed the topic of, restate it again, Representative Stith, make sure I get it right.
Mr. Chairman, it's the final sentence under priority 2 that would consider the proposal to create a prosecutor coordinator position.
Okay, we're back on the topic now. Any further amendments or discussion? Further amendments or discussion? Question being called. I believe this is a roll call on these, correct? Is this a roll call, Matt? Voice vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Good job, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. We are on to number 2. We're only 30 minutes in. So, next up will be Representative Chairman Brown and Senator Landon. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Come to you for select school facilities. Probably one of the twitches that Senator Landon was getting was the discussion on that, and what a better day to start that on April Fool's Day, right? So, Mr. Chairman, we've got 4 topics before you today. Plain and simple, your number 1 priority is our continuous number 1 priority, do our statutory duty, provide a budgetary reference to you and the rest of the Joint Appropriations Committee to consider. Number 2 priority is our prioritization schedule. So over the past year and a half-ish, we've seen the rules be changed with the department, and the rule changes have really kind of put a hiccup, I guess, is probably the easiest way to say it, a hiccup in the process of how we are prioritizing schools. So the committee would like to take a deep dive into that and ensure that we know what the select committee's role is, as well as the statutory guidelines and rules for the commission, as well as the department. Over to number 3, Mr. Chairman, we did have a bill last year that went through major maintenance calculations for the entire state. It did encompass the K through 12 situation, and I do notice that there is a proposed topic of joint appropriations to take a look at major maintenance and capital construction again with the Appropriations Committee. I would respectfully request that the K through 12 topic of major maintenance and capital construction remain in this committee. This is a very unique discussion when it comes to how these schools are affected. And one of the biggest things that you'll see here is we do allow up to 10% of their major maintenance funding to be utilized for enhancements. When they develop those enhancements are then no longer covered by the major maintenance calculations. And so we just kind of want to make sure that we take a look at this on a broader level, and it's not something that gets just kind of pushed into the discussion with major maintenance across the board with other state-owned facilities. So that's the big priority there. And then on priority number 4, the department brought this to us as a discussion topic, is to look at safety and security. The last time safety and security measures were updated was anywhere between 5 and 10 years ago. A lot of technology has changed and a lot of information has changed. So we would like to go back and verify with the school districts as well as the department to make sure that our statutes as well as our rules are in compliance with what the latest safety standards are. Mr. Chairman, just in regards to costs and everything else along those lines, one thing that we do have is a meeting 3 on October 16th and 17th here in Cheyenne. I would respectfully request just moving that to a one-day meeting. There's no need for us to have two-day meeting here in Cheyenne at the end of the session. You will see, however, that we do have a two-day meeting in August scheduled for the Jackson area. That is in an effort to have the committee see the Jackson High School that was approved in the budget through this process, to make sure that everybody understands exactly what that school looks like and to see some of the enhancements that are going to be done in that area. So that is all I have. I will turn this over to the Vice Chairman and see if he has anything to add.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. President and committee, I would just call your attention again to priority 2. I think it's really important that we start from the beginning and in an educational process. For those of us who have been on the committee for a while, I think that would be useful. But also, we have 3 brand-new members on the Select School Facilities Committee out of the Senate, for example. I think it would be very valuable to have a historical overview of where we've been, where we need to go, and do a deep dive into how we got a little bit off the rails the last 2 years. One of the things that happened is, you might recall, many of you, that we went to a different assessment system. Well, we had also delayed a statewide evaluation of buildings for a couple of years, and those 2 things hit. We had a perfect storm, and it made it very difficult on a department that was already depleted in terms of depth of knowledge. So we really had our hands full this past year. But some good things, I think, still came out of the efforts of the Select Committee. And I think it would be very valuable for us to spend quite a bit of time understanding why the commission exists, why we put a Select Committee in place in the first place, giving those kind of buffers and those kind of evaluations in advance of going to our appropriations colleagues. I think it's been very valuable. I'm looking at one of the long-term members of the committee, Senator Rothfuss, and I have been there for quite some time. You've been there. I just think this is a very valuable committee. And overall, I would just remind the Management Council, the state of Wyoming is really held in high esteem in terms of how we handle our school facilities out across a very big state. So I hope you'll support that. I think we can do a really deep dive and do some good and really get things shored back up and come in with a product that everybody can be very, very confident with.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I know it's not on your list, but I'm sure you struggle with it. The biggest thing I hear from the public is that schools are built too fancy. That we pour more money into schools than we should. And I think it's something we have to take seriously, and maybe it's, in your prioritization process or when you're talking to the commission, it's how do we get to that least cost product? And I know there's ways that you do it, but I don't know that we get that word out there if we do it right. And so I think it's important to think about that. If we do it right, then let's let that be known. If we don't do it right, we need to figure out how to fix that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman and Speaker. The chairman and I have talked about this, and our goal is to do everything we can to shore this thing up and come back to the legislature with something you can feel very, very confident in. I would say this, just real quickly, before we leave school facilities. We've had some subjectivity through the years, and I hope that we will understand that that's not a bad thing. We've had a very good process to develop through our capacity and condition needs indexes. We've come with a priority list, and it's reviewed by the Appropriations Committee, and it's worked pretty darn well. Along the way, though, extenuating circumstances have brought certain facilities to the fore. That's up to the legislature to consider those things. And we did that again this year. There was some criticism of that, but I would ask that you not be too tough on yourselves. You take facilities like Pine Bluffs, for example. You remember a few years ago, we had some damage to that building. We had security problems, and it just never rose within the prioritization process. That's okay. We went back and we got that facility. We went ahead and took care of Ten Sleep. Ten Sleep had been so well taken care of, but it was a 1931 building. So we went back and we picked that up. And here recently, we had a lot of extenuating circumstances that turned our attention to the southwest part of the state. And I think that was appropriate. And so we'll talk about that. All of this process that I just alluded to, I think we have an opportunity to really take a deep dive on this and find out, how we can do things better and give confidence to our colleagues.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, with the schools are too fancy, the costs associated with those, I think it's I think it's something we need to be cognizant of as well. The cost associated with building a new school, the number that was floated around for a new high school in the southwest part of the state, $250 to $260 million. One of the things that I think it's important for us to recognize is that the cost of providing the education that we set forth in the basket of goods has also changed. We now have to offer CTE courses that are far and above and beyond what we were teaching kids 15, 20 years ago. And just in the Gillette area, for instance, they've actually incorporated a welding and machining school. They have an auto tech program in their high school. And so they have to have an area for these places to go. And so that does actually fall underneath the priority number 2. And when you look at the Chapter 3, Section 8 exceptions that have been requested, those are directly related to their inability to supply the basket of goods, in their opinion. Now, that goes through an exception process, but that is something that the Vice Chairman and I have we've struggled with over the past year. And as we came into session this past year, it was difficult for us to find a way to make sure that not only were the Chapter 3, Section 8s addressed if there was money needed for them, but also to go back and take a look at those schools that rose, as he just stated, that were not part of that process, that are up and coming problems that we notice now, that if we can attack them now, it will save us money in the long run. So that's our recommendation. And again, I would just ask for a recommendation as well to make sure that the school CapCon and school major maintenance, we keep that as an overarching subject for this committee as well. It's a very large cost, and I think the Vice Chairman and I are dedicated to making sure that we hit that, as best we can.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do like the idea presented to, really go back and look at the statutes and understand the process, because what I've certainly isn't one of the new members on here. It's a lot but I think even that's beneficial for some of the old members. I know there was a lot of discussion this interim as to how the rules worked and how they meld with the state statutes, and it gets to the issue of subjectivity. And so a question, gentlemen, for you is because that has been a process in the past, but it seems to me like if we're going to establish laws and then we follow the commission's rules, that we probably need to explore some level to either provide through rules or statutes the ability to do that subjectivity, because right now, when I review that process, it's not there. So it doesn't look like that we're following our own rules and regulations. So I think that's something that we really should look at, and at some point maybe look at that statutory component and make sure, because this is obviously a component of some of the interest of the state following our own rules and laws associated with lawsuits. But something that we may want to look at to actually include some of that in the potential statutes to allow some of that subjectivity. And I would just be curious if that's something that you guys think that we would want to include in there, is, you know, when we look at that component, to make sure that we do have some discretionary ability of the select committee and the legislature to make some changes in that process as circumstances change or new information comes available. And I'm just curious as your thoughts, if that's something that we specifically need to include, or whether it'd even be receptive to including that in there.
Yeah, I think it's right.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, I think that falls right underneath priority number one, and that's the statutory obligations and the statutory requirements that we as a committee are responsible for. So I will also say that as a chairman, it's our duty, as chairman, it is our duty to guide and direct the committee. But I also think that that's a discussion much larger than just the committee itself to decide whether or not we want to change that statute and what type of leverage we want to give the legislative body the ability to change. This has always been an evolving statutory area. And I feel sorry for our poor staff, because every single time we turn around, we are trying to fix something here, and then that requires the commission to go back and affect their rules as quickly as possible, and we're just in constant flux. So I would say that absolutely, to your point, your question to point directly, is we absolutely need to be looking at what type of ability we have as a legislature, and that falls underneath our priority number one. If the committee decides to bring a bill in that fashion and bring that up, then I think we will do that.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to remember that what the select committee does is take recommendations from our commission. And those are folks who have stepped out across the state to step up and review and provide their best guidance to us. And then we turn around as a select committee and we give our guidance to the rest of all of our colleagues in the legislature. I would be very careful going forward that we tie ourselves so tightly that we bring this recommendation to all of you and say, but you can't change anything. You know, you're not allowed to take extenuating circumstances, for example, and make suggestions of how we can do better. And the Appropriations Committee does that. That's the next step that after the Select Committee completes its work, and then it goes to the body. And so I do think that under priority one, Senator Hicks, that we'll be looking at that, and I hope we will. But I always hope that we won't shut the door so tightly that the legislature can't do what it's sent down here to do. So.
Committee for Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, again, just one more question that it's became a little bit apparent to me, having served on appropriations for quite a number of years, and there's a little bit of a disconnect, because this select committee takes a recommendation from the school facilities and makes a recommendation from the appropriation. And to the chairman, one of the things that looks to me like, from my position of being on the other side of the equation, is not understanding that recommendation. And now on the select committee now seeing this process, that there seems to be a little bit of disconnect. So I was wondering, do you think there would be any opportunity in the schedule to maybe get, I think it'd be very good, back to this educational component for the select committee, to understand the actual finance side of this, you know, so we look at the buildings, recommendations, and make a recommendation to the Appropriations Committee. It seems to me it would help the committee to understand how that Appropriations Committee then looks at where that money come from and how that's allocated, and maybe just a couple hours to review that with the community to get a broader understanding of some of the potential financial constraints that we may have coming down the road. And I'm just curious if you guys had ever discussed that, having not, you know, I'm a new member of the committee. I looked at that and said, look, this is the other side of the equation. Have you historically looked at that? So I think it would give the select committee a much better understanding of how that process goes as far as the funding through the foundation program. Because we've changed that in the last year or two. When we consolidated that all into the school foundation program and got rid of some of those other things, do you think that could be incorporated as part of this priority number one, is that educational process?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, I actually will turn your attention to priority number 2, and it's the last sentence of priority number 2, and that's the study will culminate in comprehensive education of the school facilities capital construction funding for the legislature. So that is absolutely on our list, and I think priority 1 is always our number 1 priority. That's just our statutory obligations. Priority number 2 is actually to go, as the Vice Chairman said, a lot deeper dive into what we have. So you have 3 new members on the select committee from the Senate side, and I believe we have 4 on the House side. And so we do have a lot of learning to do. And this process is going to take some additional time, but absolutely, it is expected that not only will this information be shared with the committee, but also the rest of the legislature as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Seeing none. Public comments? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public comment, any? Public comment is closed. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move the interim topics for the Select Committee on School Facilities as presented, with the slight amendment to get rid of the meeting on the 17th of October. So one-day meeting on the 16th, I believe is what the chairman said.
We'll deal with the amendment first. Over the fence.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It's good to see everyone. Appreciate your time this morning.
Chairman Boner and Chairman Brown. It's kind of a, we only change one chair at a time up here. You have the floor. I'll let
Musical
whichever one
chairs,
you like
Mr.
to
Chairman.
lead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to let Senator Boner, Chairman Boner, take over on this one, run through the priorities for this one, and chime in if I need to.
Chairman Boner, you have the floor.
Okay, so next up we have Transportation Committee. We got 3 priorities, well, and then the 4th kind of catch-all. The first one being YDOT and Transportation-related committee topics. So we're looking to take a deep dive at current and future funding. We did take a little bit of a look at that. Expect that EV tax bill to come back. That almost made an introduction in the House this year, but also take a broader look at some of the concerns we've heard from this council before with what's the level of funding, state-side funding, not federal funding for YDOT, and what are we going to do to make sure that that stays consistent now and into the future. Also take a look at highway safety. There's been some other bills that didn't quite make it through the process, deal with seatbelt laws for minors, for example. Those sorts of things come to mind. We'll also look at maximum semi-trailer lengths, and then YDOT wants the opportunity just to provide some a cleanup bill. We also might be looking into Office of Homeland Security. We heard some testimony that they feel like they don't really have a home committee, being in the governor's office, and they would like to present topics relating to regional emergency response teams. I think that was a topic of some budget amendments during the most recent session. Moving on to military affairs, we look at the use of deadly force to protect military members who are protecting critical assets. that may be required to do so with their job, but our statutes may not take into account those types of situations where they have to protect, say, a C-130 from being hijacked or something like that. So we'll be looking into that. That was a concern the military department brought to us. Looking at suicide prevention for veterans and active duty military members alike, and also look at recruitment and retention, including interaction that our military and veterans have with our higher education system. So a continuation of previous 2 years, one of them being talked about recruitment and retention. There's some bills we passed 2 years ago. We're going to take a look at the effect of those policies, but also take a broader look at and strengthen the Wyoming National Guard. Also look at, that land grant mission of the university, part of that is military affairs, and seeing what we could do to bolster the recruiting pipeline going through our universities and community colleges. So that'd be the military affairs portion of it. The final one really is electronic titling. This would be building off of Representative Larson's bill that he had last year with electronic registrations. We got a good working group put together based off of that work that's already been done, and so we'd be looking to expand upon that work for the entire titling process for our vehicles. Could be a relatively heavy lift, but like I said, we're going to be relying on a working group that's already formed and functioning well, and for that one, and then we just have kind of the catch-all of any reports from agencies. So that's what we have for Transportation Committee. Mr. Co-Chairman, you have anything?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would add is the electronic titling portion here, although it's priority number 3, probably one of the top priorities to get a bill out of this committee. I've served on this committee now for 8 years, and all 8 years we've seen some level of a bill that has come through on either e-titling or titles in pretty much any form or fashion. I will say we have Bobby Frank here. I did see her walk in. She is part of the working group that has been working on this for a little over a year already, and they already have a lot of the information brought together for this. So I do think that there's a very quick process to this, but I also think that I know there's a lot of statutes that will be updated. This will be a very thick bill, and it will require a lot of attention to detail on this. But I do believe that the Transportation Committee is willing to get down and dirty on this particular bill, because this is something that our treasurers and our basically everybody in our counties have been asking for at least 8 years that I've been on the committee. So be a big portion and a big lift for this committee.
Questions, committee? Representative.
Okay, Mr. Chair, so I guess my question is similar to what Senator Hicks asked earlier. How many pieces of legislation do you see coming out of your issues? Because most of what I've read are things that your committee has been doing for 15 years. And it's the same kind of studies. It's kind of like the Revenue Committee, right? You study the same things every year. But I was wondering if there are any kind of specific, besides titling, which I do think is probably your number one, what other perhaps statutory changes or updates you're anticipating, or how many bills you think will be put forth?
Mr. Chairman, I like I said, I've been on this committee for 8 years, and at one point, this committee drafted, I believe, 18 different bills to bring forward to a session. The co-chairman and I have worked very hard to keep those to a minimum. We recognize that we need to bring our best cream rises to the top, and that's what we want to do. I would say probably between having 2 home agencies within this committee, 2 to 3 bills at a minimum for each one of these is probably likely. Now, also offering up the Department of Homeland Security, potentially falling underneath us as a home committee, and they're not quite sure where they fall in. They brought this to us as an opportunity, maybe an additional one for them. So I would say 6 to 8 bills is not out of the realm.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Nethercott.
if I may, and I'll make a motion when we're done here, but it's my position and that the Office of Homeland Security, if they're looking for a home agency, should be the Judiciary Committee, who's responsible for law enforcement and security issues primarily, as you heard. That's their number 2 topic, is law enforcement issues. Since the Office of Homeland Security is part of the Fusion Center, which is connected to law enforcement, that it makes sense that reside there with crime and justice, which is one of the primary missions of the Office of Homeland Security. So that would be my motion, but allow, through the chairman, any comments to the chairman.
Comments, Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
Phillips?
I don't have a strong opinion one or the other. We look forward to having this topic and looking into it in good faith. If that's what the council decides, certainly understand that they're in they feel like they're in a no man's land. I think it's important the council understand that more than anything, because I think that's important. It's not an agency. Technically, it's underneath the governor's office, right? And so we need to be cognizant of that.
Mr. Chairman, the discussion that came to us was a lot of the transportation of materials that follow on our interstate corridors, our highways, stuff like that, uranium transport, those types of things, that they did feel that the Transportation Committee, especially for this particular portion, right, their emergency response teams, you're probably not going to have the emergency responses sitting with the judiciary area. You're talking about if there's something that occurs with a larger scale operation or something like that, where the budget amendments were focused was to make sure that we had bomb squads taken care of and stuff like that, that if there was something occurring out on the interstate I-80, that the people that are going to respond to those areas in that particular area are going to be functioning. Again, no real strong opinion. Those were just the discussions that were brought to us during the interim topic meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up. Yes, so any bomb squad is going to be law enforcement. Anybody responding as a first responder would be law enforcement or emergency services, which I think is appropriate within the Judiciary Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My question is on the number of days. You got, full 3 meetings with, 6 days. And I just don't see I look at the hours, if you go, let's say 4 hours and 4 hours is 8 hours and 10 hours and 10 hours. I'm just not sure you've got that many hours of meetings. So should we clip a day or what's your thought? Because it does seem like a lot of hours compared to other committees that will be loaded in this.
Mr. Chairman, I think we got lots on our plate. You look at the, say the use of deadly force, that's a huge deal. I think we're going to spend quite a bit of time on that. There's, like I said, the electronic titling is a huge deal. That involves lots of, at least 4, 5, 6 different entities. So if anything, I'm concerned that we don't have enough time. And certainly, I have no problem having that last day meeting, or that last meeting being 1 day. That's easy for us to do as a chairman, just say we're only going to do 1 day. That's something I've done before as a chairman, say we don't need 2 days in the last meeting. That's pretty easy. But to make that decision now would be extremely, I would not recommend doing that right now.
Mr. Chairman, I would just echo that. Having 2 home agencies that do report to this, it usually does take 1 day for each one of those agencies to report to us, get bill drafts going, work through those bill drafts for each agency. I do think that it's incumbent upon us as chairman that if we see an agenda that looks like it's maybe not quite worthy of 2 days, that's on us to make sure that we condense that into a 1 day if possible. So you have our commitment, or at least my commitment on that if we can, we will. But to have us come back to say, hey, look, we need an extra day, it wastes management council's time, in my opinion, far more than just giving us the 2 days for each meeting.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, chairmans, I see it all the time where committees come for an extra day. So maybe we start cutting committees at the front of it, and then we hold them, and then they come for another day. We know they really need it. And so I don't know. It just seems like, I appreciate what you said. It just seems like you're light on your topics, but I don't know.
Committee, further comments? Representative Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe just some more commentary on priority 2 when it talks about suicide prevention for veterans and active military members. Labor Health spent an entire interim. We had a great bill that failed introduction to try to provide mental health services for our veterans, and I couldn't get it over the edge, House Bill 5, because people thought it was Medicaid expansion. And so I guess, is there something different or unique that other states are doing, or you want to copy or put in statute, or just any more information on that topic? Because I think it was mental health was like the #1 topic of education last year. They barely touched it. We spent a lot of time in labor health on it. Thought put some good legislation forward that didn't make it, and people didn't want to pursue it. So anything new on that topic? I know it's a major topic. Anywhere you heard in the conversation of how we should proceed, because certainly my side of the house said it wasn't that important to get over the threshold this year.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just point out that, we're looking at a general session next year, and so you won't have to worry about losing bills on our reduction. And second of all, I mean, just give you a little bit more understanding of the discussion that we heard. It could even include, looking at the veterans' property tax exemption and expanding that potentially, and to the extent which finances are a significant, contributing factor to mental health issues. And so I think, if nothing else, that would be something that would be different from what Labor and Health did. And certainly, you'll see that we didn't bring this year more revenue generating bills because we knew the dynamics in the House. We just didn't bring it. And we tried, and we still lost one on air reduction. So we're aware of those dynamics, and we're not going to waste the body's time. And it sounds like what we're working on is completely different than what Labor and Health did anyways.
Further comments? Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, a question, given your time frame, one of the topics that's kind of come up just recently is this potential review of YDOT's oversight and authority over setting speed limits on county roads. And that a circumstance in Carbon, and I'm aware of another one in another county now, where due to a number of subdivisions and things that are going on, the county wants to adjust the speed limits, and it's been indicated that they have to do a whole transportation study to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars through YDOT, petition YDOT to go through that process, to go in there and make a simple speed limit adjustment on a county road. And do you think your committee would have time to maybe spend an hour or two reviewing that issue and ferret that out for us?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, that discussion was brought up at about 4:55 this morning in a text message from Majority Floor Leader Nyman to the chairman and myself, asking if we would study that. I think first and foremost, I do think that there's a discussion and a discernment of whether or not statutory updates need to be met, and whether or not there's just an education portion of this at the county level. So I don't think that it's incumbent upon us to take and add that to the priority list, but I do think that that falls underneath priority number 1, as well as priority number 4 with the local entities. If that's something that boils to the top and we need to address that, I think we can. But I do think that there's a statutory process in place for a reason, and I think that process has worked well, but I do think that if there's some areas where we can address that, okay, certainly let's look at it. But I do recognize that some of these counties are starting to see some issues with this as it goes along. Whether or not the council decides that needs to be an interim topic or not is solely on your guys' plate. But I think at this point we could probably address it if we need to, but I'm not sure that it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so it's not just a Crook County issue. This happened in Carbon County last summer, and I would agree with you. It tends to be a little bit of an educational issue, but it's an issue that I think we're going to continue to see more and more of. And so even if it's just to spend a little time with clarifying for YDOT as to what their authority is, because my experience, at least in Carbon County, the issue was with the Wyoming Department of Transportation telling the county what they could and couldn't do that wasn't necessarily consistent with the statutory framework. So the educational component might be very valuable to head off any future problems. So thank you, Mr.
Thank you. I'll follow a little. That was one of the ones I was going to do as well. It's an issue at home, and I think it goes beyond speed limits even, as, road designs and what to do on county roads even probably need to be at least roughly looked at. And I'm not sure what the rest of the state's like. Cook County's got a lot of old county roads that are nowhere near state standards. They aren't even close. None of our bridges are. And I do think statutory needs to be looked at, because some of these counties just don't have the means to meet it. So appreciate the look. I don't think it necessarily needs to boil up to the point of being a knife and an interim topic, but it needs to be on your plate. The one other one that came to me, and actually there's a couple, and these aren't out of left field. I believe our bill on light vehicles on I-80 failed this year, and that was a fairly serious topic. Am I correct, that failed, Senator Boner? I can't remember.
Sorry, you need to speak up, Mr. Chairman. What would you say?
The light vehicle penalties on I-80, didn't we fail that?
No,
bill?
that passed.
It did pass.
It repassed, yes.
Okay, I couldn't remember. As I leaned over to Senator Nethercott, that's how good I am on remembering what I voted on and not voted on. So obviously that doesn't come there. Also, I-80 tolling forever is a topic. Are you even going to roughly brush on it?
Mr. Chairman, that was part of the first thing we said was, get funding, and certainly, that IA tolling is not a new topic. We'll take a look at that, and there's been some suggestion that, the first thing you do is ask the Federal Department of Transportation for permission. That's the first step. Maybe that's something we could look at and see what the options are, and then probably be 2 or 3 years before this legislature has to make a decision as to how that looks, if it moves forward at all. But, it might be worthwhile to have a bill that gets that ball rolling. And you could even continue the concept that we had a little bit with, if you pair that with an efficiency study with the department, that'd be a balanced approach that ensures that if we're going to end up asking, say, for a toll road, we very least make sure the department is operating as efficiently as possible. And the timeframes there can match up fairly well.
Mr. Chairman, I again, serving on this committee for 8 years, it seems like it's every other year we have this discussion on I-80 tolling. I can give you the quick and dirty on it. There's basically 3 options. We build a new lane in each direction and toll it on our own dime, about $1 billion in each direction. We go to the Federal Department of Transportation, ask them to do this, toll the existing lanes that we have. We go through a study. We have to fork over the money as a state to go through the study to prove to them that we can do this, and we have a solid line that we're going to basically tax everybody. There have been 6 states that have gone through that process. All 6 states have gone and spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to try to accomplish this, none of which have succeeded, and they've all pulled out of the program. And the third is to basically do a small toll in between areas that we've talked about, Rock Springs and Green River, and you can do that with basically a diversion program that allows truckers and stuff like that. All 3 of which have been studied extensively by this committee, all 3 of which have been turned down by the legislative body as a whole. And it also creates a little bit of a cumbersome issue when you talk about the communities on I-80, what that does for transportation and commuting between Green River, Rock Springs, Rawlins, Laramie, Pine Bluffs and Cheyenne, those commuter areas. So certainly something we could look at, but I don't believe that it would be something that we would highly entertain at this point.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none. Public comment. Anybody from the public? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the Joint Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs Committee's interim topics as proposed. And then, Mr. Chairman, just for discussion purposes, I would make a motion to clip the last day off of the October meeting. So to remove October 25th, but for discussion purposes.
Okay, further discussion or amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it's appropriate now, or I would move that the Office of Homeland Security's Home Committee is the Judiciary Committee.
That is an amendment. That's a motion. Is there a second to it?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Director Olbeck.
Just by way of background on, I think, how this came about is last year after the 23 session, had a discussion with the Director of Homeland Security, and she was looking for a way to get the agency more in front of the legislature. And I suggested, hey, how about a home committee? And I suggested Transportation and Military Affairs. Not because it was the greatest fit in the history of the world, but because this was a committee historically that could use some more work, whereas Judiciary usually has a full plate. Really up to council on where you want to go with that. Just wanted to give you some background on that, on how this came to be.
Mr. Chairman, I stand by my motion.
We're going to do an amendment, and then we'll have some discussion on the extra day. Any more discussion on moving Homeland Security to Judiciary?
Chairman, so
Representative Stiff.
just so I understand the motion, is the motion to delete the Homeland Security's Regional Emergency Response from Transportation, or is it a combined motion to both delete and move to Judiciary? I'm not sure. I just want to understand what the motion is.
Delete and move.
Further discussion. Senator Hicks.
I believe if we do that, delete and move, then we're going to have to go back and look at Judiciary Committee's budget and priorities again. And I don't argue that maybe that's not the appropriate committee but we could make that motion, but then leave these agenda items where they're at, given that Transportation Committee already took a little bit of look at some of this stuff, I believe, in last year's interim and stuff, and has some background information that Judiciary does not, to help expedite this project or process, and then also just distribute the workload. So I would speak against the motion to delete this and move this topic to Judiciary.
Mr. Chairman, I support that. So we can keep this topic since it's really the primary topic that they have for work over the interim. But I do think it's appropriate that the Office of Homeland Security goes to its home committee. Judiciary can continue to work on protection orders.
The way I read it, it's been amended, basically, that it is to move the home base to Judiciary, but to leave the topic the way it is without objection. That's the way we are. Further comments? Further comments? Seeing none, question called. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion is passed. Homeland Security goes to Judiciary. The topic stays where it's at. We're back on Vice Chairman Summers's motion to cut to 1 day on meeting number 3 in Cheyenne. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I
Senator
would
Hicks.
speak against the motion, and, you know, we have 2 veteran chairmen here. I think they can manage their workload, and I have complete confidence that if they don't need it, they won't be utilizing those days. I do think it's sometimes often cumbersome, particularly when we're all busy in the fall and it comes time and we need to make a motion to authorize another day. And I'm not aware of, maybe except for one instance over the last decade, where Management Council hasn't granted that additional day to a committee if they had additional work to do. So I'm going to speak against the motion and leave it to the discretion of the chairman.
Representative Swanitzer.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask, is there the rationale behind Rock Springs or Laramie or Cheyenne? Is there anything there to visit, site-specific tours you're thinking of? It just does look a bit amorphous on your agenda for the interim on some solid points of what you're going after, but I know the military always seems to find something to bring to you as well. So any reason why you're going to Rock Springs and Laramie?
Mr. Chairman, right down the I-80 corridor. Main priority from last year was to focus on how we could keep I-80 open, visiting those communities and seeing those communities firsthand in 3 different stages of the seasons, I think is the first one. Secondarily, we do have Representative Nemec has access to some of the information that we're discussing when it comes to the bomb squads and stuff like that out in the Rock Springs area, and is planning a tour and a demonstration of sorts to show us some of the information that they are dealing with the department or the Office of Homeland Security. And then over in Laramie, again, dealing with the summit and the issues there, and then back in Cheyenne is just kind of our final stage for most of our meetings.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Stitt.
I would say that Representative Nemec does have a really cool bomb squad robot. It's worth traveling to see.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, you know, on the motion, I don't care whether we defeat my motion or not. I just think it's a conversation we need to have with each committee, because I do think every time we add in more days at the end, we'd end up adding in more bills and more expense. And I think that's why we get in that's why we're seeing more bills. So I think we have to regulate ourselves somehow. Thank you.
Further discussion. I'll have a comment on it as well. I'm in favor of cutting the 1 day. We always have given the extra day, and it makes you, when you schedule, you are both veteran chairman. You know, going into it that you probably can have the extra day if you need it, but otherwise it's gone. Your committee can be informed up front that we may be adding a day to it if we need to. But I really do think as we look at a citizen legislator, that we keep things as compact and tight as we can. And if it doesn't work for you, I can tell you I voted, Senator Hicks is correct, I've probably voted 30 times in the last 3 years on extra days, and I always vote yes. I trust my chairman. If you say you need another day, we give you another day. If you need 2 days, we give you 2 days. But I think for us to try to rein this in and keep our time as much as we can as a citizen legislature is a smart thing to do. So I'm speaking in favor of it.
Mr. President. On and against the motion, I think if we trust our chairman, we ought to leave the schedule just as they have proposed, rather than make people go through the ritual of asking for another day. They wouldn't have asked for it if they didn't think they needed it.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we're voting on whether to cut one day off the schedule or not. All in favor, say aye. 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 Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion has passed. We're back on the committee schedule. Question, Senator Hicks.
Make the motion that the committee review YDOT's oversight and authority over speed limits and signage on county roads. Yes,
Senator Hicks, would you be amicable towards YDOT's control over county roads in
Yeah.
general?
that's fine.
Okay, I'd rather see it that way. I'll second it. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Added it on, that'll add a day to you for sure. All right,
We better add the day back.
we're back there then. Okay, we're back. All in favor of the interim topics as presented, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Thank you very much. Now, keeping the rotating chairs. Senator Brown, you're gone. Senator Boner, you stay. Welcome, Senator Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, first I want to apologize for not wearing a tie. I think I was more focused on breakfast this morning than getting proper tie, so apologize for that. But with that, as the committee knows, the federal government controls 48% of the surface of the state of Wyoming, over 30 million acres. They also control 68.9% of the estate, the mineral estate. If we put that into one significant digit, that's 70% of the state's mineral is controlled by the federal government. And with that, we get about $600 million in federal mineral royalties from those minerals. If you couple that with our mineral severance tax, we get more money with our natural resources than we do from sales and use taxes. So it's very, very important to this state that we have a seat at the table and we review any federal policies or actions that might impact the development of our natural resources. We need to protect the state's interest there. So with that, I'll turn the time over to my partner and co-chairman here about some of the priorities we want to discuss in the Select Federal Natural Resources Committee.
Okay, thank you. Good to be here still, Mr. Chairman. So we're looking specifically to examine Good Neighbor Authority agreements. That's one of the bills we had that made across the finish line. A very successful program when it comes to forest management. We're wondering if that might be possible to, expand upon that idea with the BLM. No, we've already been entering into informal discussions with their state offices, what that could look like is in terms of, say, wild horse management, for example. So they're interested in that. I think that's something we can continue to pursue. Obviously, keep tabs on the ever-evolving federal regulatory environment, especially as it deals with oil and gas, something that's near and dear to everybody, certainly here, but especially us from energy-producing areas. That's especially important for us and for the state. Also look at updates on coal mining and leasing. Certainly looking at the challenges that industry faces, transportation, takeaway capabilities, so on and so forth. Also be looking at the progress on the Rock Springs RMP. Had some excellent work done by our Sweetwater County legislators that are on this committee, really helped get the ball moving and continue the momentum. So I'd like to take advantage of that expertise that exists on the committee, especially between Representative Hunter and Senator Kolb, to make sure that we continue to make progress on that important issue. So 3 one-day meetings. We did have 3 one-day meetings last interim. They were very full, went late, I think, just about every time. So this may be one of those committees where you see another meeting day request for us, but for now, we're just asking for what we had last year. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Mr. Chairman,
We anticipate having our first meeting in Rock Springs because there's significant things happening in this part of the state with the sage grouse draft EIS coming out. That's 2,400 pages, very, very important to the area in southwest Wyoming. We have the pronghorn migration corridor, which instead of being on top of the mule deer corridor, it's an additional corridor that's being proposed. So we anticipate having a lot of public testimony in respect to those two things coming out. And if the Rock Springs BLM RMP comes out with their revised draft, we anticipate having more comments with that as well. So that's why we wanted to hold one meeting in Rock Springs to get the public involved with that kind of stuff. And, trying to protect our interests as a state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and Chairman Heiner and Chairman Boner, thanks for your presentation. One thing I think when you're in the Forest Service realm is keep track of their forest plans, these revisions, and ask them, once again, how they're going to allow for public input, and particularly, those of us on the ground. So I think that's an important piece as well. You guys, I think your biggest chore really I don't think is drafting bills. I think it is just providing a forum for the public to be able to comment to these agencies about these planning processes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Co-Chairman Summers. Appreciate that. Some of the projects that the U.S. Forest Service has already volunteered to come and talk to the committee about is the Big Spring Day Use Development and the Commissary Ridge Backcountry Trail Rehabilitation and the Green Union Project near Du Bois, which is a wildfire suppression effort and salvage some of the timber to kind of what you're mentioning there, Representatives or Speaker Summers. Appreciate that. And they are very forthwith wanting to be in front of the committee to show us what they're doing. And especially with the good neighbor policy that we expanded this last session, we will have more boots on the ground, and we want to find out what they're going to utilize those boots for. And hopefully, as Co-Chairman Boner mentioned, leverage that into working with the BLM to get more of our local representation at the table as we manage these resources.
Representative Wans.
Thanks. I heard the first meeting, your other two one-day meetings, Forest Service here in Cheyenne, or?
They would be in Douglas for the second meeting and then Cheyenne for the third meeting. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Representative
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Chairman, so I'm trying to look at one of the bills that you guys sponsored this last go-around. And one of the bills failed introduction with two of the senators on the committee voting against it. Can you explain, or for introduction, can you explain what happened there on that Senate introduction?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I cannot. So I'm assuming you're talking about the additional position in the governor's office. Is that correct? And so if we do take a look at that again, I think we had a lot of good discussion after that bill was approved. And I think if we do come back, it'll be a much improved product where you look at it more of a state forester type position. The idea being you have a permanent liaison with the federal government that would help pursue things like land exchanges. Utah, for example, does a very good job of this. We do not. And frankly, a lot of it has to do with a lack of focus in our state lands office, not a particular priority, because it takes a long time. It may or may not pay very well, and that's their constitutional obligation, right, is to raise money for the state. So that's probably on me, because as chairman, we didn't quite get it there where it needs significant amendments during the session. But I think if we have an opportunity to take a look at that again, it'll be a much better position because we've had a year to think about it, so.
Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, question, gentlemen. When I look at three of these topics, two of them deal specifically with minerals. And then the Good Neighbor Authority deals with Forest Service and BLM. Typically, that has resided with the Agriculture, Public and State Lands Committee. And just when you guys put these topics out there, did you discuss them with the chairman of those other committees as to whether they had time to address these? And the reason I ask, if you go back to the statutory construction of when we set this committee up, they were really designed to look at those issues that had broad implications across the board, not specific to minerals, not specific to ag, things like Rock Springs RMPs, forest management plans. And I'm just worried that we now have 2 minerals committees and 2 agricultural public lands, water resources committee. And so did you guys coordinate these with those other standing committees to look at those issues?
Mr. Chairman, I know I talked to the Senate Chairman of Agriculture at least, especially when it comes to the wild horse issue as an issue that has kind of bounced between the 2 committees. And I think that's okay because you can, as long as you prioritize and clearly delineate who's responsible for what, it seems to work pretty well. We've had some success with the wild horse issue previously on the Agriculture Committee, and that has kind of since swapped over to this committee. I think it has to do with the people on the committee more than, this topic will always be on that committee or the other. And so, yes, we have had those discussions, and even during the interim, when, say, the Rock Springs RMP came up, something that was not on anybody's radar this time last year, I was in constant communication with the Ag Chairman, making sure that we were deconflicted. We were both responding to it, but in different ways, and that didn't interfere with each other. So that communication, well, I'm sure will continue to exist, and we'll do the same thing with our minerals co-chairman as well. Recognize that, once again, the select committee requires both a member from the Ag Committee and the Minerals Committee, so that I think the statutory construct is such that you recognize the importance of those industries, which is why we focus on them as well. So I think that's part of the committee's charge.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yeah, topics are okay. Sometimes I'm worried about having 2 minerals committees. And again, I think sage grouse affects everything out there. Resource management plans with the BLM, forest management plan affects everybody in the state of Wyoming. And I'd kind of like the committee to get back to focusing on those overarching federal issues that those other committees may not have the time to drill down on. And I would concur with Speaker Summers, the real value of this committee is to try to understand those nuanced issues that affect every industry and recreation in the state of Wyoming. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, it's more commentary than a question, but if we continue to move forward with this committee, I would really like us to focus on those bigger, larger federal natural resource issues that affect all users out there.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. I have one, and I have a potential request for you because it does hit me up home. We've put substantial money into the Black Hills Forest Plan. They're in the middle of it right now. I just spent a full 1 day sitting with our people up home. I would hope you'd consider do one of your 3-day meetings in Sundance or Newcastle as that plan comes along, because it's going to be followed by at least 2 more forest plans in Wyoming, if not 3. It's pretty similar to the mold of the RMP in Rock Springs. If we don't get it right the first time, we almost certainly aren't going to get it right the next time. And I think you guys have good expertise to help us get into the right place on it. So if I could strong arm you into Newcastle or Sundance for one of your meetings, maybe I would do that. So thank you. Comments? Senator Boner.
Mr. Chairman, we'd be glad to take that on up. Obviously, that's something that we're working on. Then we were told last year that it's no longer an issue, frankly. And so if it's an issue again, we'll continue to. That's something we were hoping to do last year, and then I think this management council told us not to. So we can absolutely bring it up again. So
it's full on issue.
Yeah. So with some of the committees discussed before, we can get that on the agenda.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on topic 1, I would like to see you expand that to not just the Forest Service, because local governments are eligible to participate in Good Neighbor Authority with the federal government. And you may very well find a lot of opportunity there above and beyond just the forestry side of G&A agreements with the federal government with some of the local governmental entities. And so if we move forward and you take a look at that, I would like you to expand that, not just to state forestry, but also look at local government participation in G&A with the feds.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate those comments. We have to keep in mind that we're kind of in between the Agricultural Committee and the Minerals Committee, and both of us have experience on those two committees, but we need to stay in our lane. And I appreciate those comments from Senator Hicks. We need to complement those committees rather than take some of their responsibilities away from them. But that's our role, to be complementary to those joint committees as a select committee. And we will try and stay in our lane. But sometimes, it's clearly not totally within the Minerals Committee, like the Resource Management Plan or the Migration Corridor or the sage grouse. Those are ideal for us, that kind of in the middle, that we can work with that. But I appreciate the comments and these other ideas that we need to focus on. There's so many things that we could focus on, but we need to prioritize, and I appreciate all the input there. And I would love to come to Sundance. I love that country up there, so.
Further comments? Further comments? Seeing none, we're open for public comment. Any public comment? Any public comment? Seeing none. Vice Chairman Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move the interim topics for the Select Federal Natural Resource Management Committee as suggested. I might have a amendment afterwards, but I'll just move that for now.
It's been moved. Discussion. Representative Swanitzer.
Thanks. Could I specify that their first meeting will be in, let's say, Rock Springs, second meeting in Douglas? And for now, let me just move the first 2 one-day meetings, and perhaps we'll decide if we need a third.
Thank you. You amicable with that, or you want it to be a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I think what we're just discussing here is we could always, the nice thing about having 6-member committees is you have a lot of flexibility. We can always move up that third meeting and maybe have it be in Hewlett or Sundance or somewhere.
Very good. Further discussion? Seeing none, I think we're clean. All in favor for the committee as recommended, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Thank you. Appreciate your time. We're on to education. Senator Scott online. Representative Northrop here, Chairman North. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, both of the education chairmen are online today, so.
Perfect. We'll let them in and. Chairman Scott or Chairman Northrop, which one of you would like to take the lead?
I'll be glad to take it off and run through the 4 priorities that we have for education. Thank you, Mr. President. Number 1 education priority, of course, is early childhood education. We need to get a better understanding of the dollars that are available through the agencies and early childhood programs, the governance structure, and just kind of get our committee better acquainted with all of that and see if we can get some more, identify the definitely the spending on early childhood education. As you know, the second part of that is K-3 reading. The reading assessment in 3rd grade is a really good indicator of how well students will be doing in the rest of their life. And so we'd like to get a good look at that and see if we can help improve the K-3 reading portion of education. Priority number 2, K-12 education. We've got lots of new members on the committee. We need to keep bringing them up to speed on how the WDE works, what recalibration will be looking like, and working with State Board of Education. And of course, we'd really like to hear how the districts are doing with the new RIDE program, see if that's working out for the districts, see how that's going to be working with the state boards work and relating to student content and performance standards. And then lastly, on priority number 2 is the external cost adjustment. As you know, we have to look at that every year, and we'll be doing that with the Joint Appropriations Committee. We'll receive those reports and work through that with Joint Appropriations. Priority number 3, charter schools. As you know, charter schools is just set up. It's kind of held together with bubblegum and baling wire right now. We need to put a better bow around it and see if we can get that straightened out. Part of that, of course, is the funding of the of charter schools, and make sure that charter school funding is in equal payments and comes at a timely fashion. Also, House Bill 166, the educational savings accounts, will be included in that. Prior number 4, higher education. In fact, that's why one of our meetings is going to be in Laramie, is to look at higher education. We want to work with the community colleges, University of Wyoming, namely in CTE. CTE right now is facing quite a devastating lack of teachers coming up. When these people keep retiring, they're all our age, and when they retire, then there's nobody left to come back in. We're going to look at what we can do to speed that up, get more people involved in CTE, and also look at the PIC program, make sure that everybody's aware of what the PIC program does, and see if there's any way we can help streamline the PIC program. Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, that's kind of wraps up what education's got.
Discussion. Senator Scott, Chairman Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I would comment on the early childhood education piece. We've been hearing for years about the importance of this. One of the things I want to see, is there a good consensus out there based on the research as to what good quality early childhood education, pre-K education really is? And if there is, then we can start to consider, are there some ways where there's so much of this is privately done, and is likely to continue to be privately done? Is there some ways we can influence the private education efforts in early childhood to provide a better quality product that will help the students more when they get to school? So we're really starting in on this topic, and that's a place where I'd like to focus it. We do on the the reading assessment intervention program, we do see big differences among the districts, and I think we need to pay attention to that, because some districts have been quite successful and some are not. So those are key things. The second priority, the early education, that's really what the K-12 education, that's really what the committee does. And I think there's some question with some of the standards saying what's going on state board. Have we made everything a standard and everything a priority with the result that nothing is? And I think they're starting to see that. And do we need to change the laws any to facilitate improvement in that particular area?
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Northrop, Chairman Scott, you have a lot on your plate here, and I don't want to overburden you, but I wanted to ask if you have any interest in looking at providing incentives to school districts to apply for reimbursement for Medicaid reimbursable services. Right now, we have a voluntary program, but there's very little incentive for a school district to participate, and I think we may only have one district in the state that's doing it right now, because the money, if they apply for it, the money goes to the Department of Education and does not come back to the individual school districts. Is there any interest under your priority 2 in looking at that to tweak our existing law so that there'd be some more incentive to do that?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the problem there is that with the 100% reimbursement on the special ed from the court decisions, Medicaid isn't rewarding for the school districts, and it's a fair burden on them. That has been just a chronic problem that we've been unable to solve. I've worked on it both on this committee and when I was on Committee 10, and it is getting Medicaid reimbursements a lot of work, and the districts just don't see the point in doing it, given our system and given what the courts have done with it. And I think maybe we need to take another look at it after the current court case is entirely over and done with. We have some notion if are they going to change anything in that area. But that is a chronic problem we have been unable to solve.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think last interim, your number one topic was mental health, and I didn't see much come out of your committee in the end. And so my question is, why was there no bills, really, didn't see much of anything that came out of your committee on your number one topic.
Mr. Chairman, we did look at it. You had Committee 10 looking at it as well. We didn't have a great enthusiasm for replicating the mental health centers in the school districts. And I think, frankly, it's a money issue that probably is going to be dealt with in recalibration.
Representative Zonitzer, Representative Yin, all eyes closed.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Chairman, so I know that there was conversation about childhood literacy at the topic meeting that you guys had. Is that going to fall under the early childhood education? Are you going to hear it at all, or is it going to be a separate thing that isn't heard under that priority number one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take that on and get that into early childhood education. The literacy programs fall right in line with that K-3 reading and the assessment. So anything we can do to help that will, of course, make better readers out of the children, and that, of course, makes them better people in the long run.
Further questions? Further questions? See none. We're open for public comment. I see people moving, maybe? Nope. Okay, no one wants to talk to us today. Public comment is closed.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the interim topic list for the Joint Education Committee as proposed, and then I will have an amendment.
It's been moved and seconded. Amendments.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to propose an amendment that puts in mental health for both mental health issues for both students and staff, and I would like to move that up and make that priority number 2.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion to move mental health for staff and students to priority number 2. Discussion. Sensing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. It's been moved up. Further amendments.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to their priority number 4, I think there's pieces in there that I like, but Mr. Chairman, I would really like to take priority number 4, which is now higher education, and change that to CTE and make it, and that's broad enough to include college CTE as well as preparation programs for K-12 teachers, as well as CTE programs in K-12. There was an issue on a rule by WDE that was brought up, and we actually had an order that a legislative order out of Management Council that we held on to. So really what I want to do is make priority number 3 be CTE, broad category.
Moved and seconded. Number 4, you said, Senator Ruthus, be number 4.
Go to number 3. It'll be CTE will be the number 3 priority.
Okay. Discussion. Moved and
Mr.
seconded.
Chairman.
Chairman Scott.
Mr. Chairman, does that include taking a look at how the CTE programs in the several school districts and the community colleges mesh together? Because I think we have some districts, and I think mine is one of them, that do a pretty good job in that area, and some that do not. And I think there's some potential advantages to be had for both K-12 and at the community college level in particular, in some mesh between what goes on in the school district and what goes on in the community college district.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, CT on a broad scale. I think you guys will figure out what you want to look at. I think there's enough issues there to keep you busy. But I think it's a really important one and ought to move to number 3.
Thank you. Further discussion? Other than what we have.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kinski.
I don't know that it needs to be an ad here, but I'd appreciate if the committee could also take a look at graduation requirements. There's been some discussion that it's theoretically possible for a student to graduate in 2 to 3 years out of high school with CTE certification, but we have a number of requirements that stand in the way of that, and I'd be curious what the committee might be able to find out in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Swan, sir.
Sure, let me just make a motion then, if that would work, and on Senator Kinski's statement that I guess it'd be in a K-12 education to review barriers to graduation rates, or if he would like to more clearly state it, I'd certainly
Well,
second it.
Mr. Chairman, it would be barriers, if any, to a student graduating from high school with an emphasis in CTE in less than 4 years.
Thank you. Motion. Let's restate the motion, one of you. Senator Kinski.
Barriers, if any, to a high school student graduating with a concentration in CTE in less than 4 years.
Well done, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Moved and seconded, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you. I wonder that maybe this would be a friendly amendment. I think that would fit under the broader category of CTE, since we have it as a large category, if that would be.
Mr. Chairman, I intended it to go under that category.
Perfect. Thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Sensing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion is passed. We are back on.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Stith.
I would move to add under priority 2, studying incentives for school districts to apply for reimbursement for Medicaid reimbursable services. Again, with the focus there being on, is there a constitutional way to provide incentives to the school districts?
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Sensing none. Question called. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no.
No.
Amendment is passed. We're back on the recommendation, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to make it clear then, priority number 3, school choice, would go down to priority number 4.
That's why I read it.
Okay, thank
We're
you.
back. Further discussion? Seeing none, question being called. All in favor of the interim topics as presented, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. It's passed. Chairman Dockstetter and Burkhart, minerals. Let's make us wealthy. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, and members of the committee. Minerals had a busy year. We've put boots on the ground at Kemmer Coal Mine, a Kemmer Power Plant, a future Natrium nuclear site, which has now been permitted for construction. We've been out to the Trona Patch in Rock Springs, seen the old and the new proposal there. So much happening there that we can hardly keep up with. And we've been out to an open pit coal mine in Gillette. It's been a busy year. We've limited our bills, focused on education with our new committee members. And with that, we go to priority 1, Mr. Chair. Regulation of infrastructure carbon dioxide pipelines, incentives for enhanced oil recovery, bonding issues related to oil and gas recovery. We feel this is priority 1. With that, turn it over to my co-chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with this issue, we've talked a lot in the past year about enhanced oil recovery. The one limiting factor is infrastructure. If you capture the carbon dioxide, it's getting very difficult to get it to where it's needed. So we feel we need to look at those issues. The industry has asked us to review bonding issues to make sure that they're current and up to date with what's going on in reality. And I'll take just a few minutes to address the issue that Senator Rothfuss brought up initially. which were committee bills. We had 10. We didn't bring any bills. The co-chairman and I did not bring any bills. We didn't feel we had a really good chance of getting through introduction. And we prefaced those in the committee, and Senator Rothfuss is on the committee, with a lot of education for the committee, considering we had more than half of the members of the joint committee new to minerals. So I think we did what we planned to do. I would say that, to answer the question before it's asked, we would look at the same number of bills for this year and take the same approach. We have some challenging technical issues to address, and we would start with education of the committee so that they have a good working knowledge prior to getting into working bills. Probably the first meeting would be more education than actually working bills, and that was the approach we took last year. With that, I think we can go to priority number 2. Mr. Co-Chair, do you want to take it? Or?
Sure, mining-related issues, tax issues, credits and exemptions, mineral ownership, and repeal of low-carbon energy generation standards. We put these in order, as you well know, that we'd like to start out with these and make these our emphasis. And with that, priority number 3, energy-related water issues. This one is really important. With that, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with the energy-related water issues, I think we find in the future that water becomes our most valuable resource, if it isn't already. There are a number of companies who want to take that water and convert it to hydrogen, which frankly, personally, I oppose, considering that we currently produce 84 million barrels of produced water out of the oil and gas industry a year that currently costs money to dispose of. We need to look at ways to use that better, and if they want to turn that into carbon or into hydrogen, then that gives our petroleum industry actually a profit center of selling that produced water. And again, that's an issue that's come from the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission also, to look at how we address produced water out of the industry. And I think with that one, I go on to number 4. Currently, it's an interesting arrangement in Wyoming. And I'm looking at a research done by Dr. Alexander out of the Economics Department at UW. In 2018, Wyoming ranked dead last of states in the amount of money put into research. Today, we rank 8th in the nation in the amount of money going into research in this state. A lot of grants coming in, a lot of private industry. And it's important to look at how that money is spent, where it's going, where it comes from. And it's an issue that's come up in minerals. I know it's come up in appropriations. So we would propose a joint Minerals Appropriation Committee meeting in Laramie to look at those issues, to evaluate them. And that's the request up front for an additional day to do that joint meeting. To look at that money, make sure we're getting the best use out of it possible. There were some issues in the past year that came up where there were offers of considerable amounts of grant money coming into the state. And we need to make sure that that's being appropriately used for the state and for our industries in state.
Related to, Mr. Chair, if I could just say, with the university, we'd like to put boots on the ground with a committee with the ITC, the Integrated Test Center, and the High Bay Center as well. We'd like to have the committee well informed.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, with the ITC, there was a bill that did not make introduction. We just ran out of time. Currently, the Integrated Test Center has dual management coming out of the Chief Executive's office plus out of the School of Energy Resources. That all needs to go to the School of Energy Resources. That was the intent this past year. But we can't make that change, especially for contracts and those sorts of things, by a change in the budget. We have to do it statutorily. So the request there for that one. Mr. Co-Chair?
Well, we'll go on to number 5. We need to coordinate this because a lot of information needs to come from the Public Service Commission on this, but we'd use HB 200 as a starting point and sort out taxation of electricity generation. With that, the next one, Mr. Chair, is economic development issues that are very broad, workforce issues, banking issues, special deposits, unclaimed property. We've got a request out of the Treasurer's Office to, some of that needs to be cleaned up, and so that's a very broad approach with priority number 6. Mr. Co-Chair.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, so priority 7 has to do with the regulatory reduction and some other issues coming out of the Department of Environmental Quality. It would be our intent to bring back Senate File 44, which was vetoed in its entirety, removing the problematic amendment that was made to that on third reading in the House. To us, that's about a 15-minute. We've already beat up that bill. As the committee does, we take bills, we put them together, we pull them apart, we make sure they're the best possible bills we can get. And this would be one where I think we've already done it in that. So that's one. Also, there's some regulatory reduction efforts coming out of the Department of Environmental Quality, and we're their home committee, so we would look at handling those. And then finally would be all the committee reports that we get. The meetings, we have one meeting scheduled for Laramie, the other two are in Casper as placekeepers. I know there's a desire to go to Gillette, look at the Integrated Test Center, the coal pyrolysis events, probably go over and look at the rare earth mine over Bonds, their processing facility near Sundance and Upton. But Casper for the second two were placekeepers more than anything else until we decide exactly what information the committee really desires. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. You know, this is just my opinion, but I'll probably bring it as a motion when the time comes. But electricity generation tax is also in corporations. They have that in their list. Very likely, I would think that would reside with them and not you. You guys seem to have a lot of topics for the amount of time that you have, and so I'll be honest, I'm thinking priority 5 and 6 are probably stuff that I would have go away.
Mr. Chairman, no argument there, especially corporations taking on the tax issue, fine with that.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Chairman Burkhart.
Priority 6 was kind of a catch-all. We had a number of requests that we felt were worthwhile but didn't know where to go. For example, the one on Uniform Testamentary Trust Act, that might need to go to Judiciary or someone else. The previous chairman of Minerals Trusts were kind of his thing, and that's why you saw some of those bills come out, and I think that's why people suggested it come to the committee, but I don't think I have any particular expertise. I don't know that the co-chairman does or anyone on our committee does for those issues. So that was a catch-all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I think you've got latitude on that, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, well, and I think of the Unclaimed Property Act. That was always something that when I was on appropriations dealt with that. I'm not convinced that's in your lane, frankly.
Thank you. Further comments, committee? Further comments? Sensing none. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just would say that traditionally Title 13 for banking issues have been through the Minerals Committee, and that's where the special deposits and testamentary trusts are coming in as regulated entities. And it's not necessarily related to some of the underlying trust concepts, I think, which come through Judiciary Committee, but more of the regulated trusts that the Banking Division does. Banking Division and Title 13 comes through the Minerals Committee. So I think it has nothing to do with the, unclaimed properties, fine, and a lot of the other discussions are, but typically, if the Division of Banking has interest in bringing updated legislation, they bring it through the Minerals Committee, and I don't know if the request came from the Division of Banking in all of these instances or not, but that's the standard vehicle they use.
Mr. Chairman, the request for the special deposits and testamentary trust came from the public.
Thank you. Further discussion, committee? Further discussion? Thank you. Public comment, minerals, public comment. Wow, we're batting 100%.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Pat Sweeney would like to provide public comment.
absolutely. Let's put him on.
Okay.
Welcome, Mr. Sweeney.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Council. On the economic development, I hope we're not eliminating that topic because it's an important one to continue. And I would ask that I believe access to healthcare is a huge issue on economic development along with workforce housing, but I think another committee is taking a look at workforce housing. But I also ask minerals to, under the economic development category, look at access to healthcare. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Comments, Mr.?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we didn't find a lot of desire in the committee to take that one on. So if there's another committee out there, they're welcome to it.
Thank you for your honesty. That answer your question, Mr. Sweeney?
To not believe, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, that healthcare and housing are not the issues in our state. Sorry to hear that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none. Committee, what's your pleasure? Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the proposed interim topics for the Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee. And then, Mr. Chairman, I would have an amendment. There's a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded.
So,
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to eliminate priority number 5 and priority number 6. And on priority number 8, I would add committee reports, and then I would go and agency updates. And that would probably allow them if there's something from the Division of Banking that needs to come in, that would be there. That would be my.
Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, I'm going to leave the three of those lumped together. Any discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The one thing on priority number 5, electricity generation, that I don't believe is covered by what the Corporations Committee is working on, that is an interest that the Minerals Committee has had for a number of years, is the second sentence. The committee would also consider self-generation and the sale of excess capacity generated from self-generation. And this gets into the discussion of large industrial energy projects and how to make that work. So if we're going to do this, I guess the question is, can we move that sentence over to the Corporations Committee so that somebody's doing it? Because it kind of needs to be done.
Thanks, Senator Rothfuss. We'll deal with the amendment, and then we'll bring that as a next amendment.
Sounds good, thank you.
As well. We're on the amendment on the 3 topics. Further discussion? Seeing none, question called.
What the question is?
The 3 topics were to eliminate.
Yeah,
5 and
Mr. Chairman,
6.
it would be to eliminate number 5, eliminate number 6,
And the
and amend number 8 to say committee reports and agency updates.
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify, so the colloquy with Senator Rothfuss about large behind the meter generation, we're going to reconsider this electricity generation topic for minerals in that context after this vote? No?
He'll bring another amendment. We'll clean this up, and then he can bring another amendment.
It'll be in corpse, I think.
Yeah. Right, but it'll come after this. We'll run these 3 amendments together, these 3 linked ones together.
Mr. Chairman, my concern is that we saw a large project in southwest Wyoming almost stalled by trying to get electricity from from one of the big utilities. They finally ended up self-generation. I want to differentiate this from the rooftop generation, selling it back up into the internet, or selling it back up into the grid. And so I might ask the 2 co-chairs, what's your intention here on this? Is this with respect to large self-generation behind the meter? Or is this the homeowner with a rooftop unit selling it back into the grid?
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So what I want to do is eliminate priority number 5 here, realizing that corporations has a very similar topic, and so anything we want to put in that, I think it'd be better just to be in one committee rather than to have this topic in two committees. So
Mr.
we would
Chair,
move it over, whatever language we wanted here, move it over to Corps to capture that.
I hear you, but I just was wondering from the two co-chairs, because there may be a very specific mineral development emphasis that they're looking at on this, and if they're fine with it going to corporations, then that's fine.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. So Senator, to answer Senator Kinsky's question, pretty much what he said is the intent on that sentence. We are looking at large projects self-generating. We've had discussions with the Public Service Commission on how that works with our certificated territories for our power companies. There are companies looking at considerable in-house or behind-the-meter generation. We have one, Trona Mine, that is looking at multiple nuclear reactors, and there may be excess power. And how that is handled under our current regulations. This is an issue the PSC is looking at, and we felt it was best to get ahead of this, considering, again, this large project in southwest Wyoming that's looking at needing 800 megawatts to run their project, which is frankly 2.5 nuclear power plants similar to Kemmer. So how do we handle those? If they're all in-house, fine. If they sell any of it, that becomes another matter. So to answer Senator Kinsky's question, excuse me, that was the intent with that sentence, was to look at those issues specifically, more than just taxing it, but how do we handle it in-state regulated?
Mr. Chairman, we have some big projects potentially out there, and that would be our interest, not the little solar panels on top of somebody's roof.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is something that I've worked on for a number of years, and there are a lot of potential large projects that are dealing with hundreds of megawatts of power that cannot be implemented in the state of Wyoming based on a regulated utility structure. We preclude them, and that is honestly a real problem for development. So when large entities look at Wyoming, they say, well, we can't operate under that regime because we couldn't generate power and then sell it secondary, or we couldn't generate power through wind and sell it to a hydrogen facility directly, as a hydrogen synthesis facility directly. We would have to sell it to the utility, and then the utility would sell it back at a markup based on what the PSC says. So we are in our own way substantially on these large projects, which could include anything associated with aluminum synthesis, silica for processors and chips. And none of those facilities would look at Wyoming and say, we want to be there. The way Trona currently works is they fully own the operation. If you do that, it's okay. But that's a very restrictive business model that is not of interest in many cases. And so we are out of the competition for many of these high power processes. And that's the intent of what this is looking at. If Corporations Committee wants to look at that, they haven't looked at it in the past. We've looked at it on Minerals Committee for a number of years. I'd honestly like to continue it, but if there's interest in moving it to corporations, they obviously are very familiar with the concepts.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to amend my motion to retain priority number 5, leaving the second sentence in. Obviously, the first one would move to corpse. If that's what the committee, my second's good with that.
Without objection, that's what it is. Further discussion? See none. So the motion will be to let Mr. Vice Chairman restate your motion. That's done.
So the motion will be on priority number 5 to amend it to where it's just the second sentence. The committee would also consider self-generation and the sale of excess capacity generated from self-generation. The elimination of the first sentence, which will go to corporations. The elimination of priority number 6 and the addition on priority number 8, these will be renumbered obviously, to have committee reports plus agency updates. So that's my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion. See none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion is passed. We did get the corporations into that motion, so that's done. Any further amendments or additions? See none, we're back on recommendation. All in favor, say aye. Mr. Vice Chairman.
My apologies, just one thing, and I know Senator Hicks and I have talked about this issue, but on your priority number 3, and the produced water and the ability to reuse that water, it's something that Senator Hicks and I briefly talked about as it relates on the Colorado River side. We have a lot of produced water on the western side of the state that is re-injected. And I think looking into the idea of whether you could clean that water and augment the system, augment the Colorado River, is something worth looking at. Because if the you-know-what hits the fan, it could be water that we darn sure could use in the end.
Appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think that'd be very appropriate in the whole discussion of produced water. There's a lot also on the eastern side of the state, north of us and all around this community. But yeah, we need to look at making the best use out of our water, and the origin of this was request from the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission as well as industry, and that, and at the same time protect our resources.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Kinski.
and a question for the two co-chairs. I see the emphasis on produced water, but what about water that is in formation so deep and is so non-potable that there's no possible viable economic use for it except possibly hydrogen production? Is that excluded from your review, since the focus seems to be purely produced water?
Mr. Chairman, to answer Senator Kinski's question, I think we could add that in. The limiting factor there is drilling those wells deep enough to go after that water. There is a lot of water very deep in Wyoming, but it's very expensive to get at. Some of it potable, some of it non-potable. But I think that's another option we can look at. Our main concern is that we don't give up what I would call good water, meaning water that is potable to start with or easily potable, our rivers, our lakes, to producing power, energy, producing hydrogen. I think every drop of that water is vital to the state. So
Mr. Chairman,
the use
then,
of it is,
do we need a motion to actually put that in wording, or go with a verbal cue on that, Mr. Co-Chair, or the co-chairs?
I
How
don't
would you
think
want
you
that?
do. I think you have the latitude in the topic.
Okay.
I appreciate it getting brought up, though. I think water's a critical issue across the board. Okay, I think we're clean where we're at. Question being called, all in favor of the topic as presented, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Topic is passed. It's 10:38. We'll take a break till 10:50.
If I could get everybody's attention and get all the members back in. Senator Driscoll may have had obligation at 11, so we're getting pretty close to that, so. If I can see if everybody comes back. Is there anybody else out in the hall? Take just a quick look there for me, thanks. It seems like I lost quite a few members here. All right, we'll just carry on. And so the next agenda item is joint revenue. And it looks like we have Chairman Beitman on the Zoom. Chairman?
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's good to be here with the Joint Revenue Committee. Obviously, we had last year, our big focus was property tax issues. We solved most of it, well, not most of it, some of it this year. Obviously, the Senate File 54 got vetoed, and we're probably back to the drawing board on that. So if you look at priority number one, this was what the committee decided that we would go into the interim to further take a look at property tax issues, including in reviewing any of the property tax relief bills that were passed in the last couple of sessions and considering options for additional revisions. Obviously, with the Senate File 54 being vetoed, that'll probably become front and center again to get immediate relief, broad relief to the majority of Wyoming taxpayers. Then we've been kind of chipping away at tangible personal property the last few years. We've had some bills that kind of take a bazooka approach to it. The committee wanted to take up maybe a more measured approach to rolling back some of this tangible personal property taxes, maybe raising the de minimis amount, hearing testimony, try to find the sweet spot for what that should be. So we're not hurting our small business owners and people that, they probably don't even know the law even exists, to be quite frank with you. So we'll take a look at personal property taxes. Also, Senator Pappas had an idea. He went to a tax forum through the legislature and heard about this truth in taxation laws that other states are enacting. Basically says that the local taxing authorities, when they set their mill levies, have to do it more on a budget based, and anything above and beyond what their last year's budget was, that spending has to be approved by the voters, or they have to have a meeting. It's an interesting enough topic that we decided we're going to listen to, go in and do some research on this and see if it's something that maybe we should pursue in the future. And also the ag exemption comes up a lot, and I think we'll take a little bit of time to study the ag exemption. I think it's at $500 right now. Farm Bureau and other not agencies, but other people that commented said, yeah, it's time to take a look at that and raise that. So that's something that's on our list under property tax. And then we only have two priorities. We wanted to keep it short and sweet. That seems to be the theme today anyway. So I'm glad we did, because yeah, hopefully you guys don't pile any more on our plate, but if you do, you do. Priority two is taxes to replace reductions in revenues due to revisions to the property tax system. Co-Chairman Harshman had an intriguing idea of going with a higher sales tax and getting rid of most property tax. I think it's an interesting enough topic that we put it as our second priority, something to maybe as we get away from property taxes and go more towards a sales tax base. It's more fair, it's broad based, and we can also look at broadening the sales tax base. Finally, once and for all, looking at getting rid of a lot of exemptions and broaden the base so we can keep our rates low, especially if we go away from a property tax and go towards a sales tax, which a lot of folks that I've talked to seem to like that idea. They'd rather pay a little bit higher sales tax and no property tax, or a lot less property tax. And let's see. The last thing on there is a review of potential other sources of revenue, including a tax on purchases of real property. to replace all or a portion of the property tax. And we have 3 meetings scheduled in Casper in May, Sheridan in July, and if needed, Cheyenne in November. We'll see how the discussion goes and what you all have what you all have planned for us as well. And with that, I'll stand for any questions. I'm not sure if Co-Chairman Harshman's on or not, if he has anything to add.
Chairman Beitman, I think he's still coming back from vacation, wherever he was at. So Chairman Beitman, I have just one question, and that's the same question I've had on others in the committees is, do you really think you need 6 days, to do those 2 topics? That's the question.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we put those November dates in there just in case. We think we can get it all done in 2 meetings, but like I said, depending on your prerogative for the management council, and if you have anything else you guys want us to look at, or if say the truth in taxation idea gets legs and we need to start working that a little more, we might need an extra day or 2. I think we all know where we're at on property tax relief. I think, resurrecting Senate File 54, it was a revenue committee bill this year. It'll probably be another one next year. I don't think that thing needs a whole lot of work. It's been vetted multiple times. So yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think 2 days, maybe if we need a day in Cheyenne to finalize bill drafts, we might need it, but yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, do you have any questions or comments to the good chairman? If not, I'll go to public comment. Is there any public comment on the Revenue Committee? If not, Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move the revenue interim topics and suggest we eliminate maybe November 19th if it's not needed, but then two-day meetings and then a one-day meeting in November. But otherwise, leave the topics as is.
Is there a second on that? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Not, I'll call for the questions. All those in favor of the interim topic list as proposed, with the exclusion of November 19th being no longer available to the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could we separate those motions?
Well, he made it as one motion. If the bringer and the second one is separated, he can. Okay, so we'll do that. We'll just do that, and then we'll do the amendment, which is to eliminate, the amendment would be to eliminate one day, which is the 19th. Senator Hicks, do you have what you want to comment on that motion, or?
No, I just was going to vote on it. I think it will be the same discussion we had on the last one, so.
So, Mr. Chairman, the vote we're taking next, is that just on the amendment to remove one day?
Yep, the next vote we'll take would be on an amendment to remove the one day, the 19th. All right, all those in favor of removing November 19th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
Mr.
All right,
Chairman,
now back on the,
call division on that.
okay, division having been called on that, all those in favor of removing November 19th, raise your hand. 6. All those opposed? I count 6-3 in favor. Now back on the main motion. Anybody want to talk on the main motion? If not, all those in favor of the amended agenda for revenue signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. We are now on, looks like on good committee number 10, Joint Labor, Health, and Social Services. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know my co-chairman may be on. He's experiencing his 6th day of snow out there in Kemmerer. That does look like he's on, but I'll take the lead and then ask if he wants to jump in. So your joint Health, Labor, and Social Services Committee has proposed 3 two-day meetings, and our topics are as follows. Our number one priority is maternity health care and child care. As many of you know, we've lost 2 of our maternity wards, I guess, services at our hospitals in the last 2 years. We have a third that's under tremendous pressure right now. And it's just very difficult in Wyoming to figure out how people should be traveling, 50 to 100 miles to give birth. And so we're really trying to work on how to save the existing services we have and then figure out how to recruit new services into parts of our state that we are referring to as maternity health care deserts. Another big issue that we heard for the last 4 years has been when it comes to childcare facilities. That's certainly been an economic development issue we've heard for more than a decade. I know Representative Yin had a bill that did pass this year on residential use, but many of the issues that came forward to the committee dealt with how do we increase access to childcare services, either through subsidies, through deregulation, et cetera. And so that became our number one priority as a committee. Number 2 is a healthcare authority. This is brought to us from our executive branch. When they went through and looked over the last couple of years with a lot of meetings that the executive branch had conducted around the state, we've gotten to the point where healthcare is 19% of Wyoming's economy at this point. It's a serious economic driver throughout the state and all of our communities on how to afford healthcare. And so the executive branch has put together a proposal they would like to bring to us on something similar to the Energy Authority, but really a healthcare authority to continue to examine many of the studies and the data out there, as well as some of the federal programs on how that combines and pushing kind of a policy think tank when it comes to healthcare and what we can do to get healthcare costs down in Wyoming. We are among all the 50 states of having the highest healthcare costs, which disencourages business and people, especially young people, from moving here who are not over 65 yet. Priority number 3 is on social service programs. There's a lot of discussion from the committee on SNAP, on TANF, on unemployment insurance, how all of those programs work, what the requirements are. There seems to be sentiment out there among various members on my committee that some of those programs aren't working or they could be working better. And so priority 3 became kind of a grouping of all of those programs and workforce and family assistance to ensure that they are working correctly and allowing our committee members to be able to ask appropriate questions to further their knowledge. One that came from kind of external sources, priority 4 on provider enrollment. It appears to be taking up to 3 or 4 months to accredit some of our physicians and healthcare providers, nurse practitioners, et cetera, to get on private insurance rolls so they can provide services. Medicaid and Medicare, as you can read there, usually can credential people within 60 days. For some reason in Wyoming, and there's various opinions on what is taking so long, whether that's on behalf of the physician or the practice or the insurance companies. Several other states, as you'll see, do have legislation in this regard. And so it was brought forward as an issue seemingly out of Natrona County, especially that it's taking a very long time to credential providers. Priority 5, music therapy. This has been a working group that has been meeting for at least over 2 years, talking to the committee. They believe they have finally put together a presentation with appropriate data and information to present to us that they would like to seek licensure as a board. And other states have taken initiatives. So they've certainly met with Chairman Baldwin and I multiple times over the past year, make a compelling case that I think the committee should at least study and listen to and decide if it is an emerging necessity to have a licensure for music therapists. They would like to come to our first meeting in Afton. And then we had just a host of all sorts of miscellaneous bill ideas and issues affecting Wyoming when it comes to pharmaceuticals. So you can see there in the second paragraph, everything from obesity-related treatments with these new GP1 drugs that you see on TV all the time, talking about opioids as well with the current opioid epidemic that's still existing here in Wyoming, as well as just a host of other things the pharmacy board could be doing. They wanted to bring back our Good Samaritan laws for overdose, and then step therapy. Over half the states have some laws when it comes to physicians prescribing drugs and then health insurance companies saying you might not need that drug. Let's start you on a different brand name or generic to see if that alleviates a concern before stepping up to more expensive drugs. And there seems to be some wiggle room on both sides that we could look at some legislation. Then 7, just general agency reports. We do want to hear some reports from UW on the WWAMI program. There's been some significant turnover in staffing and oversight of that program this past year. And then my co-chair, I know, wanted to hear about WICHE because he serves as a WICHE commissioner. Those are our priorities. Happy to turn it over to Senator Baldwin for any additional information.
Chairman Baldwin, you got any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, that's, the other chair did a very good job explaining it. The only things I would add on to that is that the music therapy piece, they do have a good prepared preparation for a draft. It sits in almost perfect form in some way. We have to take a little work on. So that's not a very time-consuming thing. You'll notice that a lot of those things like the Good Samaritan law, it's already been addressed. There's already a bill been brought forward. It did not quite make it across the finish line. So those are issues that won't take a long period of time. But other than that, you did good. Just as far as explanation as where we're going, chose the Afton location as a hospital in the state. That's a good example of a small rural hospital that's making very strong strides forward, doing very well. I want the committee to take a look at that to perhaps get some examples of some of the things our smaller rural hospitals could be doing. Secondly, Pinedale is our newest hospital, which is now under construction. Newest hospital and the only remaining county without a hospital in the state. Wanted the committee to take a look at that as well. And then finally, moving on across the state and doing something closer.
Senator Baldwin, you're freezing up on
But
me.
that job, and I have nothing to add, but I will stand for questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're literally freezing up, I guess, probably, but thank you for those comments. So just, one question back to, and I'll go to Chairman Zwanitzer, is priority number 3, I know having served on appropriations that they look at these programs and issues, and frankly, I don't see much of a need for you all to review those. Just comments.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, and it really was a learning opportunity. As I think you're all aware, we have a significant number of new members in the House on this committee, and we did not delve into those programs or really doing kind of department updates or how the departments work this past year. And so it was more based on the significant number of questions on some of these programs and how they're working, more than any specific legislation in this area, but it was an area of concern from multiple members of the committee if they just wanted to understand how these programs worked. So I don't foresee any legislation necessarily coming out of it, but it could be under agency updates and overviews as well.
Thank you, Chairman. That's what I was going to ask, is if we just left it under reports and reviews or said updates, you could probably get some of that done by the Department of Health or something.
I believe so, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stiff.
Chairman Zwanitzer, question on the music therapy licensure. Is the goal there to make it so that music therapy becomes, if it's licensed, then it's more likely to be reimbursable by healthcare insurance companies? Is that the idea? Because I would imagine you don't want a system that's so restrictive that Yo-Yo Ma and Yitzhak Perlman can't provide music therapy in the state of Wyoming.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Stitt, that's exactly the reason. If they have licensure, then they are allowed to bill for services in this regard. And so having that licensure allows reimbursement for these therapies, both in our, I guess, schools and then in private areas. And I believe there are some people here to talk about it today too as well.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Please.
For the two co-chair, Senator Baldwin and Representative Zwanitzer, on priority 1, maternity health care, child care, these healthcare deserts, is this really unique to the maternity realm? Or I thought there were places all over Wyoming where there was just a healthcare desert, not necessarily limited to maternity. And in my observation, it seems to have a lot to do with these big regional hospitals snapping up local little hospitals and using them as feeders and then paring back the services that they deliver locally. Is it unique or should this be a broader look just at what is causing these healthcare deserts generally?
Chairman.
I would say, Mr. Chairman and Senator Kinski, yes, in general, across the board, what you described is accurate or anecdotally accurate from what we believe is happening in the system. But when it comes to maternity, there seems to be, it's a significant, there are significant costs for insurance, for care, for providers in this area who want to practice. And so, yes, across the board, significant concern. And those kind of financial dynamics that our hospitals are going through. But it really, with the loss of 2 of our centers in the last 2 years and potentially 2 more, it's just a really serious situation that perhaps we focused it on maternity and OBGYN when it is a larger issue, but specifically, we don't want people having to travel, more than 2 hours to give birth or seek these services. These aren't like one-day surgeries, right? These are multiple appointments, and then you can't quite time delivery for most of us.
Mr. Chairman,
Please go ahead.
according to a report that came out in my local newspaper 12 days ago, nearly half of Wyoming counties lack an OBGYN specifically. So I do think it's very specific to women's health care in that it is a significant concern regarding infant mortality, prenatal care, and women's health care in general. So I think that's a troubling trend that needs to be corrected, that goes beyond rural healthcare challenges, so.
Mr. Chairman, we have massive healthcare challenges in this state, and they're increasing
I think Co-Chairman Sullivan will help
exponentially,
me.
and that's why we have
Chairman
number 2.
Chairman Baldwin, why don't you give it another shot?
Can you hear me now, okay, Mr. Chairman?
I can, but you just give it a shot.
Okay, I'll talk pretty fast so you can hear me. I would say, regarding Senator Kinski's comments, this is maybe actually 2 separate topics. I don't believe OB is closed down because of the large healthcare centers. I think it's a totally separate issue. But that is an issue, a very significant issue that I've heard from multiple places across the state. What concerns me as well, that really nobody's touched on, is the OB care. If that person in a remote rural community that has taken away their OB services happens to have an OB emergency while they're in that rural community, they then, go to the ER, and nobody in that hospital is now trained for OB. That's a significant risk for the infant, for the mom, for everybody. And I think that's a travesty. And I think it's a significant issue we've got to address. But I do agree that there's another issue on board, but I think they're separate issues.
Thank you, Chairman Baldwin. Any other, Senator Kinski, did you have any follow-up on that you wanted?
Helpful, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you. Thank you to Representative Zwanitzer and Senator Baldwin. That's helpful.
All right, are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman Zwanitzer, on priority number 2, it says the committee will look at legislation to make a proposed Wyoming Healthcare Authority a reality. Could you just expand upon what a Wyoming Healthcare Authority, what are you contemplating here in legislation that came out of the recommendations of the governor's task force?
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Majority Floor Leader. And they have put together a 25-page report of the need that came from the task force. What they're envisioning is something honestly quite similar to our energy authority, that it's an independent 3 or 4 person, perhaps think tank entity that works with the University of Wyoming, that works with other entities to provide healthcare policy on the increasingly kind of desperate environment we're finding ourselves in Wyoming when it comes to the cost of care. We've been saying for a long time that we have multiple hospitals that have less than 2 weeks of cash on hand. And it's just kind of gotten to that point where the need for services we can't seem to provide, and the cost is going up. So from the executive branch, they would like to bring a proposal to put something in statute to create a new entity, whether it's a separate operating entity or agency, but really to make a pitch to us and the legislature and say, we've had healthcare commissions twice now in my 20 years. And it seems like they get assembled and they last for 2 or 3 years, and then they have 3 or 4 bills, and we're done. And they go away for about 4 years, and then, hey, we need another healthcare, what was called the Healthcare Commission the second time. And so came, did its work for 2 or 3 years, brought some bills, went away. It's turned into kind of an executive branch task force internally among the stakeholders. I think their desire is to bring it back and say, you know, instead of kind of having these entities that last for 4 or 5 years and go away, let's make something permanent that really works on healthcare, on funding, because our state is getting older and we don't have services and costs are going up, and it's become an economic crisis for small businesses especially. They just can't afford insurance rates and we don't have the services. So they're kind of seeing the perfect storm and saying, we really need a full-time entity to recommend things, for better or worse. And that's why we said, you better come to the committee and make the pitch, and we need to discuss it before moving it forward.
Senator Hicks, you got a follow-up, or you good?
No, I'm good.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Excuse me. All right, public comment. Any public comment? Oh, just a second. We got one more question.
Thanks. Or give it to Paul. Go ahead.
Plan, or actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. So given, and so the question is how many pieces of legislation, and why 7 days, which is more than I think we've ever granted any other committee initially, but go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although revenue was given 5 meetings back in 2000 when I was the chair, in 2020 in the chair. The reason, actually, we were the most efficient committee and picked our dates first, and we had all 3 of our meeting dates selected that ended before September. And then we realized with the Mental Health Vulnerable Adult Task Force, we might need one more half-day or full-day meeting in November. How many bills do I think are coming out of it? When I looked, I thought about 10, actually. 1 on music therapy, 1 on provider relations. I don't know if we're gonna have legislation come out of the priority number 1. Priority number 2 is certainly 1 bill if we are gonna create a healthcare authority. So I don't envision more than 8, although that pharmacology topic, there's about 7 different issues thrown in that we could pursue. Any of those as committee bills. I think many of them would come back as an individual bill if they're not a committee bill.
So, Mr. Chairman, my question is then, could we move one of the August days to the November to, I think and, you know, as Senator Hicks was maybe suggesting? Is that possible?
I think so, Mr. Chairman. We could maybe have a 1-day meeting in August and a 2-day meeting in November, or just have 3 meetings and take out the Cheyenne meeting in August would be preferable. It is my co-chairman's last year in the legislature, and I think he was hoping to get a head start on freedom, but we might keep him around till the very end of his terms.
Senator Baldwin, you are indentured until the end of your term. Anybody, any other questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would just add on a number of bills might be contingent. Some of those agency reports, we may have some cleanup type bills that will come out. There'll be short bills, certainly language fixes. I can't see more than 3 or 4, but I would include those in that list that will come out of there.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any questions, comments, any last? All right. Public comment. Please, sir, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Andrew Schneider. I'm here today representing the Wyoming Music Therapy Task Force. And Chairman Zwanitzer did a good job of giving you an overview, but I just wanted to back him up and explain how we got here. We do in fact have a bill draft, so I don't think we'll take up a ton of the committee's time. I got involved in a volunteer capacity with this group. I am not a music therapist, and no surprise to those of you who know me. But the group a couple years ago decided the field was growing enough that it was important for Wyoming to look at licensure to protect patients out there. And there are 16 states that already have licensure. Nevada and North Dakota were the first states in 2011. There are 13 states pending this session who are also doing licensure. So nationally, this field is growing. Our process here in Wyoming, since I've been involved, began with the Governor's Health Task Force. I would say there was a lot of encouragement and enthusiasm for the conversation there, as well as a lot of questions and challenges which have gone into the bill draft. That led to the Mental Health Licensing Board. Again, a lot of great feedback, talking about the science, talking about the billing, and talking about the structure of that board and that being the correct place to do this licensure. Again, feedback from them went into the bill draft. So I think we came up with some draft language here that's pretty tight and ready to go. We're also looking forward to a chance to educate legislators on what music therapy is. There are a lot of questions we anticipate that still exist, and frankly, there's a lot of misinformation out there about the efficacy of these treatments, how they interact with other physical rehab and mental health treatments. But suffice to say, for today's purposes, the science is there, and we look forward to sharing how music therapy is already enriching the lives of patients in 5 counties that have music therapists here in Wyoming. With that, stand for any questions, sir.
Are there any questions of Mr. Snyder? If not, thank you, Mr. Snyder, for your testimony. Would anybody else like to comment on this committee on labor health? All right, I'm going to close public comment and I'll go to the committee. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the letter as presented for labor and health.
Is there a second? Any amendments? I have one, since I'm unfortunately the chair, but I didn't know that at the time, that I'm going to bring it anyway, which is I want to eliminate priority number 3. That's my motion, would be to eliminate priority number 3. I think it can be covered in agency reports, and I think it can also be covered through appropriations. So that's my motion.
Second.
All those seeing nobody wanting to comment, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Are there any other motions? If not, back on the main motion to, how about the dates? How about the dates?
I don't care what you do, whichever you want.
Representative Stiff, on the dates.
Mr.
Anything?
Chairman, I would move that rather than 6.5 days, that 6 days be authorized, with the August 2-day meeting being moved to November.
Is there a second? I'll second it for purposes of discussion, so go ahead.
Or the 3 2-day meetings, I just think you leave that up to the committee to make a determination when's the best time for them to meet.
Would that be a friendly amendment?
Yes,
Just to loosen those dates up to allow
Yes,
them
Mr.
to
Chairman.
move that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm just cognizant of the chairman of the Senate committee might draw a late elk permit this year, and that could really screw up his elk hunt.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that he has an opportunity to do that, so.
So Representative Stiff, would your motion be to make meeting number 3 not set the date, but leave that to a later decision of the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, so for a total of 6 days for the interim.
All right, that's the motion. All those in favor of that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion carries. Back on the main motion, any other amendments? Back on the main motion as amended, which is to take out number 3 and the amended dates. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We are now on corporations. Joint corporations. Do we have any chairman?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case is joining right now.
Senator Case is here.
Okay, we can't see you yet, but you're gonna come into picture here pretty quick, maybe. There you are. Chairman Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, my co-chairman, Jared Olson, has business to attend to today, and he's trusting me to be able to present to you today on our topics. Should I just jump right in?
Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. We've got a pretty plain vanilla slate for you today, mostly dealing with the agencies that we are responsible for, including the Public Service Commission, the Department of Insurance, and the Secretary of State's office. So our first priority that we propose is, as you know, we proposed this last year as a 2-year study of all the electric utility issues that Wyoming is facing. And this is a continuation of that. And, we had quite a bit of success this year with our electric bills. And also, I just point out that the rate pressures on Wyoming utilities, especially Rocky Mountain Power, continue. And with the bringing on of new transmission lines designed to take mostly renewable out of Wyoming, those will have to come into the rate base. That's going to be a serious shock. We'd like to monitor that, work with the commission on the implementation of the bills we've already got, and explore a couple of new areas. One we have mentioned in the appendix is it's not really solely territorial to the Corporations Committee, but this idea of electric utility tax is certainly gaining ground as Wyoming's landscape changes with respect to the production of electricity. And as you recall, there were several strong efforts. There was a joint effort between myself and Representative Larson, and also a separate effort by Representative Burkhart. We all shared, and the idea was to eliminate the sales tax on electricity within the state of Wyoming, and also to raise taxes on electricity production in an offsetting manner, but for Wyoming customers, but it would also enable us to export some of our taxes in the electricity area. And it sounds like new and shocking, but I would point out to the Management Council that we've been taxing electricity for decades now. We just call it a coal severance tax, but that's precisely what it does. It impacts the generation of electricity, both inside Wyoming and outside for people that buy our fuel and burn it in their power plants. This really needs to be addressed. We're kind of outgunned by the industry, and I've talked to Mr. Obrecht and our staff attorneys. I've talked to the Public Service Commission and people in the industry, and we realize that we're being outgunned by the lobby with respect to the renewable energy industry, who tell us that we can't possibly do this under any shape or form. And so there's a separate appendix. It actually requires a separate appropriation or budget item, asking for $30,000 to get some independent expert analysis of the issues of ability to tax electricity. And whether that's home in corporations or minerals or revenue, they're all great committees doing great work. I have spoke to the Minerals Committee about this. They were so kind to hear the bill I proposed on the repeal of utility taxes. And I think the Revenue Committee could really verify how the industry is trying to shut this down before we really think it through. The other issues are the sunset of the Telecommunications Act, where it's upon us now. This is the year that we need to produce a work product. We've done a lot of thinking about it. We've had the industry work together, and we have to kind of decide on a direction. As we've gone forward, we've felt that there was a telecommunications regulatory void in Wyoming, especially for local service. There might be some reasons to keep parts of the act around to help in that area to the extent that we can. And we also feel that we need a mechanism to be able to more carefully monitor the 911 system, which uses, of course, telecommunications facilities. And there's not a very good central reporting of outages, on and on and on. So
we'd like to look at those things in conjunction with the rewrite of the Telecom Act or the potential complete sunset of the Telecom Act. Our other agency is the Department of Insurance, and they always have ongoing accreditation bills. We have some concerns about insurance availability in Wyoming and the cost of insurance. We'll take a quick look here. Our auto industry minimum coverages have not been touched in a long time. And we have learned that we're one of the few states that doesn't have any kind of mandatory fraud reporting, which would kind of enable better policing of insurance fraud in Wyoming that would potentially allow for less upward pressure due to fraud. Next is the Secretary of State's office. And I just touch on a couple subjects. Traditionally, we have election bills as a big part of our interaction with the Secretary of State's office. The election bills that the committee brought didn't fare that well this year. They were pretty much slaughtered upon introduction in the House, although I think all of them did receive more than a majority, indicating they might have success in a general session. The Secretary of State's office had proposed a couple of election topics. One in particular is he was very interested in increasing the number of signatures required to be an independent candidate, to make that a little bit more of a higher bar on that. We talked about it. The committee didn't want to take it up. And to tell you the truth, Mr. Chairman, the committee has not much appetite for election bills. And I don't really share the committee, but they're a great committee and they work hard. And they were very disappointed in the events that happened. And especially there was one bill of residency that would have been important to have for this upcoming election. There was another bill with respect to voter intimidation, and it actually created a misdemeanor level to make it a more of a prosecutable offense. Anyway, no appetite among the committee for the election bills. I note, of course, it's an election year. I think this will probably be the most contentious election in at least our legislative races coming up. And of course, there'll be a presidential race as well. I don't think there'll be that much action in Wyoming on that. But we have now seen lots of issues about anonymous mailers, hacks that are off the radar, ways that people can get together and avoid campaign reporting, none of which could be fixed before the election, and they were contained in those bills that went down. So I suspect we'll monitor this one, and I bet it's going to be a doozy, and just share that with you. But the other areas, we work closely with the Secretary of State's office on corporate licensure and fraud, and trying to drill down in that area. We're excited about that collaboration, and we have a really good working relationship with those issues. Priority number 5, most of this came from the city of Cheyenne, and they talked about, there's a lot of concern about housing in Wyoming and how to promote more housing. I wanted to be sure that this topic also considered the role of the private sector in housing, because I'm a believer that the private sector is really the one that provides most of the housing in Wyoming, and that I'm not so sure what government can do. But there are tools that we could explore. The city of Cheyenne, I believe it was the one that also asked us to explore the use of tax increment financing to encourage more housing. And the city of Cheyenne also had a tie-in with our electric topic, in that they had a proposal. They'd like to be able to have renewable energy on some of their spaces, and this would be not a net metering facility. These would be very, very large facilities that would come under some kind of arrangement, or possibly competition, possibly cooperation with local utilities. So we thought we'd take that up, but that's up in the electric one. Mr. Chairman, that's it. we always work hard. We do use our 6 days. We bring a lot of bills, but we do it's a great committee, and I think you'll all speak to the work that this committee has done. So I'm hoping for our full meetings, which are now lined out, and the first one is actually later this month here in Lander. In addition, we requested $30,000 for the electricity study. We're willing to cooperate in any manner with members of Management Council, with members of other committees, and with our staff to find the right way to find the answers about the electricity tax study. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you, Chairman Case. In our discussion with Minerals, we kind of took the generation tax off of their plate and figured it would go with you. So they're going to look at a different piece of electric generation, basically industrial generation for its own use sort of thing. And so I think we're all in agreement on that. Anybody have any questions of the good chairman? Senator Hicks first, because I was just looking his way.
So Senator Case, on your priority number 5 there, it also went into abandoned and nuisance buildings as well as rental housing regulations and on and on and on, and looks like an omnibus kind of topic. Any ideas how long that's going to take and potential bill drafts that might or might not come out of that topic?
Chairman Case?
Mr. Speaker, my gut tells me that I don't think there's a lot of good ideas to come out of this space. I mean, I'm a great fan of the private sector. I think government interference in housing has caused more problems than solutions. But there is a bunch of people that would like to talk to us and propose some ideas. Some of these ideas have been kicked around. We actually had some of them back when I was chairman of Revenue. We declined to move those forward. So to answer the good majority floor leader's questions, I'm hoping it's priority number 5 for a reason. And I'm hoping, I don't intend to bring a slew of bills on this. It's the will of the committee, and we're a democracy, of course, but my hope is that it would be more educational and less implementationable, if you get my drift.
Representative Yin, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So on the priority number 1, where it's mentioning the exploring the ability of local governments to produce electricity, including compensation for renewable energy generation, would it make more, so I guess a question for the council is, would it make more sense to fall under the Minerals sentence that we gave them about self-generation and sale of excess capacity? Would that fall under the same thing? And should we strike it from the corpse and tell Cheyenne to go to Minerals for that one?
Chairman Case?
Well, Mr. Chairman, one thing I think we all need to keep kind of in the back of our head is that the electric utility industry has been traditionally thought of as a natural monopoly. And that's been a good thing, believe it or not. It means that the more we can utilize the common plant provided by the utilities, the lower unit costs can be for everybody that's on the system. And so usually what tends to happen is the people that are providing more subsidies want to have their own arrangements. And certainly it is true that industrial customers in Wyoming are footing a considerable amount of our bill. They also, in Wyoming, unlike any other state, Mr. Chairman, make up a larger percentage of our domestic production and consumption in Wyoming. In fact, it's literally about 3/4 of the electricity produced in Wyoming is consumed by large industries. And that's an amazing thing. And when I worked for the Commerce Commission in Illinois as their policy director, that ratio was reversed. And we had maybe 24% industrial load. And so in Wyoming, these industrial customers have made things possible for all of us to keep our rates low. So it's a very, very sensitive area if they start leaving in droves. There's also things like territory and competitive issues that you'll hear, especially from our REAs, but our investor-owned as well. So it is I would hope that this issue, because it fits in with the concept of a monopoly, but as we move away from the monopoly to a more competitive structure, we have to consider the impact on other customers. It's the same thing for municipalities as they go and enter into self-generation. Under Wyoming, we do have municipal utilities, but this is a case where they want to be within a certified territory of an investor utility, or possibly some other public entity, I suppose, but most likely an investor utility, and produce power for sale within there. And it's partly to promote renewable. It's partly to improve the city's bottom line and reduce electricity costs. And it probably has some other social ideas. Those are all bound up in this electric utility contract, so to speak, where what you do to one part of the system, because we all have to pay the cost of the system through the regulatory process, it's important and needs to be, I think, under the same umbrella. Let me say we're absolutely happy to cooperate with Minerals, especially like the good thinking there. Several of those members serve with me on the Energy Council. We talk about these issues a lot, and I think we're on the same page. But to really get at the overall rate fairness of, for example, renewable electricity production that potentially could be subsidized by other customers, I think we need to keep it within the realms of our study.
Are there any other questions of Chairman Case? Chairman, I'm going to have a proposal to you, but I'll wait till the time comes. And I want to visit with you before I make a motion to add something to your list, but I'll do that. I'll do that at another time. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Appendix A concept of having this additional study, is the number of scheduled meeting days sufficient to include that if we do that? Or would that require maybe a working group, a subcommittee, something along those lines, additional days? What are your thoughts with regard to scheduling if that electricity tax study is engaged?
Chairman Case.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My thinking is that we would incorporate hearing about that study with the existing meeting days that we have proposed. Remember, we proposed a full 6. But on the other hand, I am perfectly excited if we were to have a working group, maybe even made up of people from different committees that might want to be to help with this, to sort of shepherd alongside the tax study, which would be housed in corporations. But there's no reason why it couldn't be a group to help steer that forward, the steering committee. Maybe, I mean, it could be like 2 people from Minerals, 2 people in Revenue, 2 people from corporations to just kind of get the parameters of the study underway. We're going to need help from the LSO to hire someone, all these things, and then get that housekeeping part and direction part, and then bring it back to the Corporations Committee with a report from the consultant.
And Mr. Chairman,
Please
quick
go
follow-up,
ahead.
and that was what I was thinking with regard to the work that would be done on the Minerals Committee, if it could be folded into this. And I think Senator Case's suggestion of maybe putting a couple of people from each of those committees together and then bringing in Revenue as well is a good way to tackle this problem, since all 3 committees are going to be interested in that space. So thanks for that.
Senator Hicks.
So a follow-up on that, Senator Case, if we did that, the way I understand your budget request was $30,000 to hire consultants. We'd need to add a little more money to that to pay for a subcommittee of those 3 to work on that issue. Is that the way? Is that $30,000 pretty much for consultants, and we'd need to add a little extra money for the subcommittee of the 3 committees?
Chairman Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, indeed. The 30,000, I think we're going to be hard pressed to make that go for the consultant, which is going to be mostly legal advice. If we need to have additional meetings and people want to be paid, then we need to give them some money.
All right, anybody else? Senator Rothfuss?
Mr. Chairman, and just on that last point, I don't know that we would need to explicitly budget for it if we wanted to go that route, because we do have additional funds within Management Council available that could probably be voted to that. So it's something that we could do if we had an idea, and maybe we give Senator Case a few minutes or give staff a few minutes to figure out what that idea might be. But even without a budget, I think that could be done within our rule set.
Any other questions of Chairman Case before we go to public comment? Public comment, would anybody like to comment on Corporation Committee interim topics? Please come up, and state your name, who you represent, and provide comment. Thank you.
Good morning. Management Council, thank you for your time. My name is Dan Dorsch. I'm here representing the Southeast Wyoming Builders Association as their advocacy director. And I just wanted to say that I support priority number 5, housing policies for the Corporations Committee. I agree with Chairman Case in that it will be a good opportunity to inform and educate the public and the legislature about housing issues, and especially tools that are available statewide but aren't being accessed right now, such as tax incremental financing. It is being used right here in Cheyenne, but can be easily just as used across the state. And so it would be, again, I think this is a good opportunity to inform and educate. And I'd also like to point out that we do have Mayor Patrick Collins online, and he wasn't sure how to get public comment in online, if that is possible or not.
Is Mayor Collins online? Could we, are you done, sir?
Yes, thank you for your time.
Would anybody like to ask Mr. Dorsch? Mr. Dorsch, a question? Anybody? All right. Mayor, are you online or not?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor Collins is not online.
Mayor Collins, you're not online, so you're out of luck. Anybody else like to comment on corporations? Please come on up. State your name and who you represent.
Director at the Wyoming Community Development Authority. So I come in support of priority number 5 on housing policies. We just completed a housing needs assessment for the state that showed a current need of about 50,000 units statewide, an additional 20 to 35,000, from now until the year 2030. So any studies that we can do or interim topics to help look at that, whether, be private, types of situations to do those, or the public being involved in that. I just think we're a substantial need statewide, so we need to look at those topics and discuss those things. And I know there's other areas, other committees that have it too, so I think it's just in support of that.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Anybody else have a comment? Any more public? If not, I will close public comment and open this up. Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So at first, make a motion to approve the priorities for the Corporations Committee.
Is there a second on that? Second. It's been moved and seconded.
Then, because we heard so much about affordable housing, I'd like to move that from priority number 5 to priority number 3. And maybe just switch insurance to priority 5 because it's never present on corporations. So that'd be my motion to swap 5 and 3.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. One question I have, and I think we can talk about it now that on this motion, is CapFin also has housing on its agenda. And I would think that it sounds like this is the better committee for that. Now, regulatory reduction might have a different angle on it, so Anyway, go ahead. Representative Zwanitzer on your motion.
Sure, and we have not opened CapFin yet, but let me make the motion to remove housing from their interim topics and put it in one place here in corporations on priority 3.
Is the second good with that? Second's good with that? All right. Any comment on the motion? Senator Rothfuss.
I think just switching priority number 5 and number 3 is a good motion at this point. Adding the second motion, I think it's more appropriate for us to actually work through when we get to that committee and hear the presentation. Maybe there's more conversation. We've taken no further input. So I'd rather stick to the 3-5 switch at this point. I'm not saying I'm against the motion when we get there, but I think it's a better procedure.
So would the bringer of the motion like to alter that, or do you want to hang tough?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to hang tough, although I fully appreciate and actually agree, but while the motion's on the table, let's just dispose of it to save some time in our afternoon.
All right, anybody want to comment on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we're back on the main motion. So Chairman Case, this is where I want to bring in a motion and I want to have a little conversation with you on it. I believe the motion I want to bring is I want to have corporations investigate executive orders as it relates to the Administrative Procedures Act. And so should we be taking an executive order and ultimately putting it in like a rule perhaps that then there could be redress from the public, or they have the opportunity to comment and provide redress. And I'm going to give you the example, and maybe the specific example is the only one that needs to be worked on. So and I'm talking about the executive order on sage grouse now. So if you had 2 counties sitting next to each other, and one had primacy on stormwater from DEQ, which you can do if you're a county, and one did not, the one that did not, a subdivision that was in sage grouse habitat would be subject to the executive order and subject to mitigation with no recourse for real appeal by anybody involved. And so if you're in the county that does have stormwater primacy, you don't have to go to the state for a permit and you're not subject to the executive order. I'm not saying one thing's right or wrong on this. I just think that idea of the executive order and how it applies to the public's ability to seek regress needs to be examined. You can't have an executive order forever, in my opinion, from one to the other without some ability to ensure that private property rights aren't trampled, and tromped on, trampled, all the same. So, Chairman Case, I know I'm kind of bouncing this off of you real fast, but I am interested in your thoughts on the whole issue.
Mr. Chairman, I do think it's a fascinating thing that local government entities, because of past decisions, are or are not subject to executive order, of broad interest to the state. And I do see your point on that. And I can see how, because, the counties and the cities are other agencies, if you will, that are clientele of the Corporations Committee. And I think they would probably be interested in this as well. I'm sure we can work in a presentation and a little bit of discussion on this topic under our existing workload. But I'm not going to promise you that we would be able to devote time at every meetings and move legislation along. But we're a pretty amazing committee. I think we could get an initial presentation about this, and maybe you would help us with that and see where it goes.
Thank you, Chairman. So even though I'm chairing right now, my motion would be to add executive orders and the Administrative Procedures Act that combination, basically, two corporations, just to examine how this works with local government. And if, are there inequities in the system, and can we, this is just a step in the process, I think, to trying to find some equity. Okay. Senator Hicks, because you know more about this than probably even me, if you got any comments, it'd be great to hear them. All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Chairman Case, we know you'll work in what you can get done, and if, get a hold of me when the time comes.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
help you
It's
out.
it's a great committee. They do good work. I'm very proud of them.
Yeah. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move one more amendment, and that would be, given the fact that we moved some of the Minerals Committee work on generation over to corporation now, and then we've added this topic now to corporations, look at the APA and executive orders. So my motion is going to be to remove our old priority number 5, our new number priority 3, and free up some workload for that great committee to get after these subjects. And so I'd ask for a second on that motion.
Second.
Call for the question.
It's been moved and seconded, and it's called for the question to remove housing as a topic.
Oh, housing?
I think that was right, isn't that right?
Thank
It
you for
was
the
a little bit
second.
like a shuffleboard game.
Yeah.
It's a P game.
I thought you were seconding it to hear the discussion, and I don't know this question is called, so I just, to make sure we know, that would be to eliminate what is now the new third priority, housing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Motion fails, but it was a heck of a
I
try.
love the way my second supported me on that.
So we're back on the main motion. Are there any other motions? Representative Yin, do you have a?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would like to strike the local governments producing electricity, because I do think it would fall under the minerals priority on electricity generation. I think it fits perfectly fine under that. And that way they can consider both in a holistic manner for whether it's a municipality or a large project that wants to generate and then sell excess capacity.
So my question is your motion to remove it and also to put it into minerals under that category?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we need to put it into minerals. I think it falls squarely under the sentence that they already have. I think we just need to delete it from the Corporations Committee priority.
Okay, that's up to you. Is there a second? Moved and seconded for discussion. Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I do want to discuss it with, I don't feel like that is what we've been working on minerals, and I don't think we know enough about it, honestly, as far as the current state of what a municipality would be able to do under the regulated utility structure of the state, and honestly feel like the Corporations Committee is more knowledgeable. We have looked and spent quite a bit of time over the last few years on specifically that self-generation and direct industrial sale problem. That's an area where we've engaged, but the self-generation by municipalities, I do think is beyond what we've worked on. And if corporations is comfortable carrying that, I think they do a better job carrying it personally. So I guess I'd resist that motion. I don't know what others think.
Representative Yin, would you like to provide any more comment, or does anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, I would say the workload is pretty big on corporations, and I do not want to get mired in a net metering discussion, frankly, where we start talking about not just the large municipalities, but then we'll start talking about smaller things as well. And I think that can steal a lot of time away from the committee, given the amount of other things that we need to pursue in the committee.
Would anybody else like to provide comments? Senator Rothfuss?
Mr. Chairman, last thought there, you could literally write in the description something along the lines of excluding small-scale net metering or something along those lines to keep it off the discussion list. I think that takes care of it in a different way.
Mr. Chair.
So we're on this motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll amend the motion to instead of deleting, just amend it to not, just explicitly not include small-scale net metering in the discussion.
It's been moved and seconded into the motion to amend it to remove the item. Let's.
Mr. Chairman, would I be able to comment?
Yeah, I'm gonna have him remove his first motion.
Mr. Chairman, sure, I will rescind my original motion if it's okay with the second, and then offer a new motion, and I move to amend the sentence about producing electricity, including compensation for renewable energy generation, to explicitly exclude a discussion for small-scale net metering.
And is there a second on that? It's been moved and seconded. Now Chairman Case, if you'd like to comment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I kind of resent the idea of carving out the issue of net metering. We brought it up to this management council as part of our 2-year study. You know, it's an important issue that Senate has passed bills many times. The plain fact remains is that as it's currently configured by being one of the few tariffs that are actually in our law and not set by the Public Service Commission, it causes the benefits to some customers come at the expense of other customers. And we have to figure out a better way to go forward with that. You know, we need to have those discussions. Those are important. It's going to become a much more essential issue as we go forward, and more people benefit from being subsidized in their installation of solar producing equipment by the rest of the utility customers. And the PSC agrees that this is an issue. The utilities agreed under oath that this is an issue where non-net metering customers are providing subsidies to people that enjoy the net metering arrangement. Having solar and other facilities can be a good thing if the tariff structures work to support everyone and represent the costs and benefits involved. That's all we've asked for. It's been passed by the Senate, and it really should not be taken off the table. And it fits exactly, it's the same issue scaled up to what the compensation is for municipalities and other large solar systems that want a favorable way of having their power be purchased by the utility. So I hope we'd be able to look at this at least holistically and intellectually without restriction.
Okay, now back to the committee on, anybody want to comment on the motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Stiff.
I think Chairman Case said it right, so.
Okay. Question being called. All those in favor of the motion say aye. All those opposed?
No.
Chair is in doubt. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. The motion carries, so that amendment to restrict will be placed in it. Yes. Yes, next motion, please.
So the next motion is do we even require a motion to form a subcommittee? How would you like to address that issue?
Yeah, I think we have to endorse that next act.
Yeah, I think I think the idea is great. I think taking a couple members from each committee is a good idea. How you all want to try to structure that, I'm certainly willing to listen.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we authorize a subcommittee led by the Corporations Committee, a committee of 2 individuals of corporations, 2 from revenue and 2 from minerals, to work on this issue, and also provide an additional $20,000 budgetary to compensate for that additional work by those committee members.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Let me go to Chairman Case. Does that sound like a good idea, Chairman? Does that work?
Yes, sir. Well, I love subcommittees. I like the idea that we're actually involving these other important committees, and I think it speaks well for a better work product. Definitely support it.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there, yeah, please.
And Mr. Chairman,
Senator
is
Roberts.
part of this motion to also endorse the appendix that we have here, which includes $30,000 for the legal consultation? Okay. Good deal.
Okay, so please repeat what the motion is then.
So the motion would be that corporations takes the lead in establishing a subcommittee member of 2 members of corporation 2 members from Minerals, 2 members from, who was the other committee? Revenue, yep. That we would approve the $30,000 Appendix A budget for consultants and add another $20,000 to pay for subcommittee members' expenses associated for that work.
Thank you. Does everybody understand the motion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Are there any other motions on corporations? Please. Matt?
Sorry, you guys were a little too fast on that last one. We don't need $20,000 for 6-member subcommittee. So it's like 10. That would be real high even.
Well, how about, that was up to, right? If we don't spend it, we don't spend it, so it doesn't matter.
We won't spend it, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, the idea there is now they have a $50,000 budget. I think the chairman indicated it may cost a little more to bring in, additional consultants and legal advice. So that just gives them a little more flexibility in that budget. So.
All right, I think that's clear. So we're back on, any other motions on corps? Back on the main motion on corporations. All those in favor of the interim topics as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. We will now stop for lunch and be back at what time?
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman Case, please.
is there any chance you could do the legislative technology and process? And the reason I'm asking is I have an NCSL energy security meeting at 1:00.
Yeah, it is. We'll let, go ahead, Chairman Case, fire away.
Well, and my co-chairman is Representative Zawana, sir. And this is a standard request we've made every year. We work closely with legislative staff on this. We did not have a meeting last year, although Chairman Zwanasern and I did try to schedule one, but staff was just too overwhelmed preparing for the session back in December. We'd like to have one, maybe 2 meetings and review our process and all the issues with technology. You know, we've done good work in the past. We don't bring bills, we bring recommendations to this committee. And it's a chance for to engage with the lobby, with our legislative staff, with the chief clerks, and with the citizens to talk about process and look at ways we can make it better or make it clear. And technology too, that's been a big important one. I yield to my co-chairman.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to say, does the committee have any questions on the proposed agenda for Select Committee on Legislative Facilities, Technology, and Process? No? All right, how about the public? Any public comment on this? Nope? All right, I would accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the priorities under Legislative Facilities, Tech, and Process.
It's been moved and seconded. All those sensing your urgency to get to lunch, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. What time, Chair? 1 o'clock.
Thank you all.